Chapter 21. The Adventure of the Round Shark. In the morning, Daguyu woke with something warm and squishy pressed against his face. He swatted it away and stared down at a round land shark curled up on his pillow. No wonder he'd had that nightmare last night. The little creature had been sleeping on his face. He set it on the bed and pulled a blanket up over both the thunder beast and the round land shark so they could keep dozing. Then he went downstairs. The Ai Guanxi siblings were already up and making breakfast. Daguyu joined them to help. The household had grown noisier lately, more mouths to feed, and among them was the round land shark, an absolute bottomless pit. Daguyu still couldn't explain how something so small could eat so much, but the food bill had clearly shot up. Luckily, Daguyu had an income. He was making high-grade dragon energy cubes every day. With his current skill, he could produce more than Du ordered, and Du, generous and well-off, let him keep the extras. It helped. Only a steady supply of dragon energy cubes and a stack of advanced universal cubes could keep the round land shark quiet for a while. Daguyu quickly learned another troubling thing about his new companion. The round land shark had an obsessive taste for anything metal. Over the first few weeks, it chewed through or stole every metal object in the house. Pots, pans, and even the bowls he used for breakfast had been grabbed in mid-use more than once, dragged off by the little creature before he could stop it. After the third time, Daguyu had had enough. He wrestled the stolen utensils back, set the shark down firmly, and gave it a stern warning. If it kept ruining his cookware, there would be no more of the delicious cubes it loved. That ultimatum worked, at least for the cookware. Left bored, the round land shark turned to less valuable things, the corner of the table, the leg of a stool, or more often, the top of Daguyu's head. It wasn't malicious. The shark's nibbling was its clumsy way of showing affection for someone it trusted. Daguyu didn't put up much of a fight. The bites were gentle, more like persistent little nips than anything that injured him. And since his body had been getting stronger from the regular farm work and meditation, he found he could tolerate its attentions a lot better than before. One morning, while he was making breakfast, a sharp sting at the crown of his head told him, without even looking, that the round land shark had decided to claim a perch. He set down what he was holding and reached up to peel the small, warm creature off his scalp. The round land shark gazed up at Daguyu with huge, pleading eyes. "Khoo!" it murmured, opening its mouth wide. I know, you glutton," Daguyu said, rubbing its head before setting it gently on the ground. He handed the shark a small box of cube-shaped treats and told it to snack on those while he finished cooking with the butler siblings. The meal was ready quickly. The other Pokémon ate modestly, but the land shark's bowl was piled into a mountain. The butler siblings had to use their powers just to lift it. No ordinary human, least of all Otoko, could have managed that weight. As soon as Daguyu sat down, Bulbasaur released the shark, and it dove into the heap of rice like a husky let loose. The mountain of food vanished almost instantly. Seeing the shark devour its breakfast so gleefully made the others eat with more appetite as well. After they finished, Daguyu led Bulbasaur and the rest out for training, bringing the restless round shark along so it could get used to the routine. He kept the session light. The shark had only been born recently, and overtraining would have done more harm than good. That morning, Daguyu even rang the newspaper office to announce bigger rewards for anyone who beat him. The offer was generous. Any trainer who defeated Daguyu would receive 5 alliance coins, 1 box of high-grade energy cubes, and 5 boxes of high-quality intermediate energy cubes. Winners were also given the option to buy premium universe all energy cubes from Daguyu at a discounted price, with custom-made cubes available for an additional fee. And even the losers weren't left empty-handed. Anyone who lost would still walk away with a free box of high-quality intermediate energy cubes. The notice went out in the morning, and by the afternoon, a crowd had gathered. The response was overwhelming. Even though Daguyu limited himself to only 3 challenges a day, trainers flocked to watch. Rewards like these weren't something you saw every day. Even the quartz conference only offered better prizes to a very small number of top competitors. Daguyu handed out the prizes on the spot, but there were so many people that his training ground couldn't hold them all. They had no choice but to call Miss Junsha in to keep things under control. Then the match began. Daguyu unstrapped Bulbasaur and the others, and the Pokémon visibly relaxed the moment their restraints were removed. The first onto the field was Thunder Monkey. The opposing trainer sent out a rumbler. At Miss Junsha's signal, the battle was underway. While everyone's attention was on the fight, Daguyu didn't notice a small, round land shark dog, barely as tall as a calf, crouch down and slip out of the farm. No one spotted it. It moved easily past the crowd. Wide-eyed and a little foolish with curiosity about the world beyond the fences, the pup wandered aimlessly for a bit, then randomly picked a direction and used a digging trick to slip underground and disappear. A short while later, a small head pushed up through the soil along the riverbank. It glanced around, sniffed the air, and froze. There was a strange, familiar metallic scent on the breeze. Guided by that smell, it picked a direction and set off. The rotund land shark of a Pokémon kept digging, nose to the ground as it followed the scent. Deeper in the forest, a handful of men in black uniforms moved cautiously between the trees. "Boss, are there really Pokémon this rare out here?" one of them whispered. "It has to be," the leader replied confidently. "I paid good money for this tip on the black market." The others were buzzing with excitement. If they pulled this off, they'd be set for a long time. "Quiet!" the leader snapped. He parted the bushes with a careful hand and found their prize, a small Snorlax, sprawled and sleeping soundly beneath a tree. He signaled behind him. Two of the men stepped forward with a capture gun, aimed and fired. A metal net shot out and draped over the sleeping Pokémon, but it gave no sign of waking. "It's secure. Move. Carry it to the car. We leave now," the leader said, hardly able to contain his excitement. The younger brothers stepped forward eagerly, lifted the still sleeping Snorlax, and carried him deeper into the forest. After walking for a while, one of them frowned. "Wait, the car was parked right here. Where did it go?" another said in surprise. A different brother stooped to pick up a wheel lying on the ground. "Is this one of ours?" he asked in disbelief. Their leader was equally baffled. In all his years, he'd never seen anything like it. The wheels were there, but the car itself was gone. "Be careful. There might be Pokémon around that eat metal," someone warned. "Spread out and check the area." They dispersed cautiously, combing the undergrowth and calling out to one another as they searched. What they didn't notice was a shark-shaped Pokémon working silently nearby, rapidly chewing through the metal net that had bound Snorlax. The creature glanced at the snoring Snorlax, then at the team leader with his back turned. A cunning gleam flashed in its eyes. It gave Snorlax's leg a quick tug and slipped quietly underground. The team leader, seeing nothing amiss, let out a relieved breath. I turned around and Snorlax was gone. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. How could a little Snorlax be as big as me? We all stared at the fresh digging marks in the earth. I fell silent. Today we'd run into someone who knew what they were doing. The others crowded around, equally stunned when they realized the length. Snorlax had vanished. "Go find it," I said through gritted teeth. "A Pokémon that size can't have gotten far." Then I took the lead, following the trail of disturbed soil. Below ground, the land shark was struggling to haul the youngster along. It kept surfacing now and then to check its bearings, and each time it popped up, it saw those suspicious men in black trailing it from a distance. Panic fluttered through it. After all, no matter how clever it seemed, it was newly hatched. It was already impressive that it had made the right call at all. With a squeal, the rotund land shark tucked its head back into the tunnel and redoubled its efforts, dragging the little Snorlax forward. Carrying another Pokémon slowed the digging considerably. Progress was far slower than it would have been alone. The leader and his men in black closed in on the trail, moving quietly as they neared Daguyu's farm. They didn't rush or make noise, only quickened their pace, hoping to catch the round land shark before it surfaced on the property. Underground, the creature seemed to sense the danger. It held its breath and dug faster, drawing on the reserves it had been feeding on. Just as a man in black was about to intercept it, the round land shark broke into the farm. The others looked to their leader. He stared back at the farm with a hard, gloomy expression. A crowd still watched the struggle unfolding there, oblivious to the approaching threat. After a moment's thought, the leader signaled a retreat. They already knew the location. There was no point in forcing a confrontation now. Better to wait until nightfall for a cleaner chance, and perhaps make a little extra profit while they were at it. So they slipped into the trees and sat down to wait, resting until darkness gave them an opportunity to move. At last, Roundland Shark crawled out of the ground, dragging little Snorlax behind it. What shocked everyone was that after being hauled around like that for so long, the baby still hadn't woken. Roundland Shark was completely speechless. It tried everything it could think of, but nothing woke the pup, so with great effort, it hauled Snorlax back toward home. When they reached the front door, the Guanxi siblings, the household caretakers, saw Roundland Shark in a state of exhaustion, struggling to drag the limp Snorlax. They exchanged a glance, and using their powers, gently lifted the little one and carried him inside. The shark, utterly drained, went straight to the kitchen and started devouring the energy cubes Daguyu had prepared that day. The siblings brought it a cup of tree juice and then asked what had happened. With its mouth full, Roundland Shark began to explain. When the siblings heard that it had sneaked out and encountered bad guys, they grew alarmed. Without another word, they hurried off to find Daguyu, who, as it turned out, was right in the middle of a brutal fight. Only one Pokémon remained on each side. Daguyu had his Bulbasaur, and the opponent still had Mukti. Mukti's repeated shrinking and annoying support moves were infuriating. If Bulbasaur hadn't been clearly stronger, it would already have been finished off. For now, the battle had settled into a deadlock. Neither side could land a decisive blow. That stalemate worked in Dagayu's favor, though. Being stuck in a minimized state drained energy faster, and Dagayu knew he could outlast his rival. His Bulbasaur could recover under the bright sun, Sunny Day was active, and it could photosynthesize for additional healing. It also had Guard to shore up its defenses. Calmly, Dagayu told his Pokémon to hold its ground and defend. Mukti's trainer, however, grew impatient. The longer the fight dragged on, the less it favored him. "Slime! You sludge bomb again!" he barked. A small glob of sludge formed and streaked toward Bulbasaur. Dagayu's eyes lit up. "Now, Venusaur, solar beam!" he shouted. Venusaur instantly gathered sunlight into a concentrated beam and unleashed a blinding ray straight at Mukti. "No, Muck, get out of the way!" the opposing trainer shouted, panic in his voice. But it was already too late. Venusaur and Sonar had been waiting for that exact opening. They fired a solar beam the moment Muck committed. As Muck released a sludge bomb, the solar beam slammed into its face and knocked it out instantly. "Muck can't continue. Mr. Otani is the winner," Miss Junsha announced briskly. The opposing trainer recalled Muck into its Pokéball, and Dagayu handed the ball back to him. After thanking Dagayu, the trainer hurried off toward the town's Pokémon Center. With the match over, the crowd thinned, some trainers walking away lost in thought, others chatting about the fight. The Guanxi siblings hurried up and explained what had just happened. Dagayu's expression darkened. He apologized to Ms. Junsha and rushed back to his house. Inside, he found Snorlax and Landshark happily eating together. He felt a flicker of anger at first, but seeing them so content calmed him. Miss Junsha followed him into the house. "Mr. Otani," she asked, "is something wrong?" Otani explained the whole situation to Miss Junsha in detail. "I see," she said after listening. "Judging by their numbers and the way they're dressed, they sound just like the poachers we've been tracking. I'm going to call my superiors and ask for backup." Daguyu held up a hand to stop her. "If reinforcements are coming, tell them to be quiet," he warned. "If these are the same people, they probably haven't left yet. They could be hiding nearby, watching." Miss Junsha nodded. The caution made sense. When she called for help, she told those coming to stay disguised and move quietly. "They'll come to my farm tonight," Daguyu added. "We'll wait for them and spring the trap." As dusk fell, the poacher's leader and his men crept toward the farm. Night had settled over the fields. Everything was still. From outside the fence, they watched the farmhouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. Satisfied, they climbed over the barrier and slipped into the yard. "Release your Pokémon," the leader ordered softly to the men behind him. "Take them out in one strike. And be careful. No noise." Still, despite his confident orders, he couldn't shake a sense of unease. Something about the quietness felt wrong. They released their Pokémon one by one, fanning out in teams to surround Daguyu's house. Suddenly, a blinding spotlight swept over them. A few of the men froze, momentarily stunned. "We've walked into a trap! Run!" their leader shouted, reacting fastest. He reached to call out a flying Pokémon to make a getaway, but at that instant, helicopters droned overhead. Several armed officers leaned out. The show of force was unmistakable. The leader dropped to the ground and put his hands on his head. His men, startled by the sudden turn of events, hesitated for a beat. Then he barked at them. "What are you standing there for? You're just here for the money, not to die. Move!" They scrambled and copied him, dropping to their knees with their hands on their heads. The police officers, who had expected a fierce fight based on previous encounters with poaching gangs, could only exchange surprised looks. This time, the arrest was almost embarrassingly easy. Miss Junsha had officers take them into custody one by one, confiscated all their Pokéballs, and then escorted the prisoners to the waiting vehicles. "Mr. Otani, thank you very much for your help," she said. "Without your help, who knows how long it would have taken us to catch those guys." They were pretty clever. Daguyu and Miss Junsha exchanged a few polite words. She led her team away, promising to try to make sure Daguyu got some credit. He waved her off. The officers left one after another. Back in the room, Daguyu flipped on the light and regarded the sleeping Snorlax and Shark with a throbbing headache. He sighed. "Forget it," he muttered. "We'll deal with it tomorrow, come what may." Chapter 22, Big Eater +1. Breakfast this morning dragged on for 2 hours. That's not my normal routine, but the reason was simple. Landshark and the little Snorlax had decided to turn eating into a contest. Who could put away the most? If they don't get food, they throw a tantrum. If you try to deny them, they topple over and roll on the floor until you cave. As a professional breeder, I know you can't just let them gorge themselves. Overfeeding at this age can seriously affect a Pokemon's development. Still, if I refused, the two of them would make a bigger fuss than any crying child. Usually, one round from Landshark is manageable. I can handle his theatrics. But add in a baby Snorlax, and my house looked like it was about to be demolished. I couldn't physically fight them. And even if I could, I wouldn't. Using violence would only make things worse and could leave lasting psychological scars. That would be losing the forest for the trees. In the end, there was only one reasonable solution: negotiate. I told them the contest could happen, but only once. Surprisingly, they both agreed almost immediately. I watched the two little ones start eating, and they didn't stop for 2 hours. Daguyu and the Iguan Shi were too exhausted to move. Of course, Snorlax had a huge appetite. After evolving, it was famously the hungriest of all Pokémon. Still, what was going on with those little roundland sharks? They were tiny, but they never seemed to slow down. They kept eating even after Snorlax had stuffed himself and collapsed to the ground, panting. Seeing this, Daguyu hurried to prepare some digestive medicine, made Snorlax take it, and gave him a soothing belly massage. Little Snorlax probably never imagined he'd one day overeat like that. After a long pause, he finally knelt before the two Roundland sharks, as if pledging to follow them from now on. One of the sharks slipped its short paws into his, looking very pleased with itself. Daguyu and the other Pokémon could only stare. That little creature really acted like an elder all by itself. Once everything was packed up, Daguyu set about the day's work. The Iguan Shi siblings were completely worn out, so Daguyu decided to finish the day's tasks alone, and managed it with ease. By the time he finished, it was already afternoon. In the caterpillar house, the first 2 batches had finished evolving into metapods, and they were all unusually sturdy. After a careful inspection and confirming everything was in order, Daguyu went back to prepare dinner. Because one of his new residents was a huge eater, he made an extra portion, following the feeding standards for a Roundland shark. Between the two of them, they could devour a week's worth of food for an ordinary Pokémon in a single day. Fortunately, that level of consumption no longer threatened the farm's finances. Otherwise, Daguyu figured they'd have gone bankrupt long ago. By lunch, the two had completely forgotten the morning's drama. They behaved like brothers, Roundland playing the protective older sibling and the Snorlax the lovable little brother. Daguyu wondered how Miss Junsha planned to deal with the Snorlax. Would she release it back into the wild? He resolved he should speak to her and try to get permission to keep it. Food wouldn't be a problem. That afternoon, Miss Junsha arrived with the Alliance's reward for Daguyu, a 10 yuan bonus and an excellent citizen medal. Daguyu didn't want the matter made public, so he refused to run an announcement in the paper. Miss Junsha nodded in understanding. So, Miss Junsha, what should we do with this little Snorlax? Daguyu asked, watching the tiny Snorlax trail after the round landshark. Miss Junsha smiled as she looked down at the creature. I've already reported it to the Alliance, she said. They told me that if you, Mr. Daguyu, are able and willing, you may adopt the little Snorlax yourself. If you can't, the Alliance will make proper arrangements for it. That won't be a problem, Daguyu replied. After spending the day with it yesterday, I grew very fond of the little fellow. He can stay with me. With that, Daguyu got what he wanted. Miss Junsha said her goodbyes and left. That afternoon, the chunk of metal ore Daguyu had ordered for the round landshark arrived. He'd noticed the round landshark had a habit of chewing on metal, and after checking into it, learned the behavior was caused by teething discomfort. He had bought the ore specifically so the creature would have something appropriate to gnaw on. If I could buy some metal ore for it to grind on, the toothache would ease as the new teeth finished growing. Using metal grinders also did a lot to improve the round landshark's dental health. With the money coming in, I was even able to buy new skill packages for Bulbasaur and the others. Once I started producing high-quality, flawless energy cubes, my income shot up. Most of those cubes were scooped up by major families and organizations before they ever reached the open market. I insisted to the webmaster, that he refuse sales to criminal or evil groups. I knew you couldn't stop it entirely, but I wanted to make sure they couldn't use the cubes to quickly build up capital. The scenes from that dream were still vivid in my head, and I didn't want to risk repeating them. Because of our cooperation, Du expanded his network across the entire Alliance. He became one of the Alliance's most prominent figures, since his channel was the only one capable of producing large quantities of flawless cubes. Many factions were quietly looking for me, but Du covered for me, and a lot of what I did remained hidden. Daguyu had no idea the trouble in the Alliance had started because of him, a simple farmer out in the countryside. Du had been under pressure from many sides and had refused to give in. In the office, he set his phone down with a headache. He knew this wouldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, someone would find out. As a friend, he owed Daguyu time to get ready and protect himself, and Du wanted to buy that time. The thought only made him more angry. He opened the group chat and typed, "At Giant of Light, you owe me a meal." A few seconds later, all right. Daguyu sounded a little puzzled, but it was only a meal, nothing major. Damn it, Du thought. Next time I'm making this guy pay for a month of food. Du put his phone away and threw himself into work. As one of the strongest fighters across Kanto and Johto and a senior officer in the search team, Watari had almost no time to rest. He was either at the office or on the road. Sometimes he really envied Daguyu, busy every day with the farm, satisfied and calm, without any of the pressure that ate at him. In his spare time, Du liked to read and go fishing, the quiet, simple life he'd always dreamed of. He couldn't give it up, though. As the most prominent representative of the Yulong family in modern times and the public face of the Alliance headquarters, he carried twice the pressure and twice the expectations. On top of that, he had his own ideals. The Alliance's bureaucracy had grown bloated and inefficient, with the upper echelons hoarding resources. Du wanted to do what he could to help fix it. At his farm, called Daguyu, he was already running today's battle event. Over time, many trainers had come to think of Daguyu's place as their go-to challenge spot. Whether they won or lost, there were always rewards. Du's own strength was considerable, and he made a point of guiding and helping anyone who had trouble. If a trainer was short on money, he'd ask them to help out around the farm and pay them in energy cubes, a benefit reserved for the trainers who battled there that day. That approach had earned Daguyu an excellent reputation in the nearby trainer community, and Du was quietly pleased with how well it had worked. As he slowly absorbed the new information, Daguyu realized he was close to moving up from an intermediate trainer to an advanced one. After dinner, he settled down in the living room, propped against the warm bulk of Snorlax, and opened a book. When Snorlax was well fed, he was in a great mood and didn't mind being teased. Eat when full, sleep when full. In just 2 days, the little Snorlax had put on noticeable weight. Daguyu read for a while longer, then tidied up and went to bed. He lay down and soon fell asleep. Chapter 23, Thundermon Evolves. In the morning, Daguyu felt his stomach take a sudden, hard punch. He woke with a start and blinked blearily down at his belly. A round, pudgy creature, the round land shark, was happily bouncing and dancing on him. He checked the clock. 5 o'clock. "Ah! Round land shark, what are you doing?" he groaned. "Kowu, Kowu," the little thing chirped, thrilled. Daguyu pressed a hand to his head, resigned, and hauled himself out of bed. There was nothing actually wrong with the round land shark. It was just full of energy, probably from overeating lately. It wanted to train. The creature's relentless enthusiasm had effectively put an end to the lazy, restful mornings he'd been enjoying for the past few days. Downstairs, Snorlax and Bulbasaur were curled together, fast asleep. Magikarp, however, had already been up for ages, doing laps and sparring with the water in the bathtub. Daguyu tossed him another water stone, then stepped outside. The caterpillar house had been enlarged, and a pool had been dug behind it. Water was already running into the new pond. The morning light over the lake was pale, the surface only faintly rippling. Summer mornings always came early, and Daguyu was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The Aiguanshi brother and sister woke to find him up so soon and looked surprised. Over coffee, Daguyu excitedly recounted the glorious exploits of the round land shark. The Aiguanshi sister covered her mouth and giggled. The brothers struggled to keep from laughing. The 2 Pokémon set about making breakfast together. Since they had a big eater to feed, they prepared a generous spread, and the Butler siblings, experienced and efficient, finished quickly. It was the kind of comfortable morning that made you want to linger. After breakfast, Daguyu meant to take it easy, so he wandered the farm. But when he came to the training field, where Bulbasaur and the others were working out, he couldn't sit still and joined them. Bulbasaur was already very powerful. Ordinary drills would only bring marginal gains. He tended not to go into battle unless he knew an opponent would truly challenge him. Kentaro and Ragnarok had become the Alliance's main pillars, their power leaping ahead of everyone else. At that level, they were virtually unbeatable, and Daguyu's energy cubes had been indispensable to their rise. That success also forced a bitter realization on Daguyu's part. Without steady support, ordinary trainers had almost no chance to stand out. Even the Alliance's top leaders couldn't fix that alone. All they could do was try to offer more commissions to ease everyone's financial burden. Daguyu knew the numbers painfully well. Feeding and maintaining his Pokémon cost him about 50 Alliance coins a day, not including the extra energy cubes he needed. That added up to roughly 1,500 Alliance coins a month. If he didn't produce high-quality energy cubes himself every day, he simply couldn't cover those costs. Compared to most trainers, he was lucky. Most of them were in much worse shape. He felt a complicated mix of pride and sadness as he watched the Thunder Beast glow. The creature swelled with light, then settled into a taller, sleeker form. When the radiance faded, a handsome, dog-like Pokémon stood before them. Raidenmon. Daguyu couldn't help but smile. Raidenmon's evolution was something to be proud of. Daguyu hugged the Raidenmon's neck happily. Thanks to his careful training and strict regimen, diet, supplements, and everything in between, the beast had developed exceptionally well. After its evolution, it was far larger than a typical Raidenmon. On all fours, it stood a full head above Daguyu. Daguyu himself wasn't short. He was 175 centimeters, but even so, the Raidenmon towered over him. It had become the farm's second-largest resident, only behind Bulbasaur. Until recently, Kentaro had been the biggest. He was still massive, muscular and powerful, almost the same size as the Raidenmon. Roundland Shark watched the new giant with envy. The Raidenmon, playful and confident, scooped the shark gentle into its jaws, tossed it onto its back, and then launched into a run across the farm. Electric arcs danced over its fur as it streaked past. Daguyu could only make out a blur as it moved. Its speed was astonishing, and its agility matched that speed perfectly. Fast and hard-hitting, the Raidenmon was a terrifying force in combat. With high-level fighters like Venusaur and this Raidenmon at his side, Dagyu's lineup had become dangerously strong. Kintaro trailed slightly behind them in terms of raw power, but only by a little. When Magikarp evolved into Gyarados, its power increased noticeably. Landshark and Snorlax were also nearby, and the Butler siblings, the Butler Pokémon, stood ready. Dagyu wouldn't let any of them take unnecessary risks. Once Raidenmon had finished adjusting to its new body, it strode over to Venusaur. Raidenmon cried out. Venusaur opened its eyes and hauled itself to its feet. Venusaur was enormous now, looming like a small mountain, and its shadow fell across Dagyu, dimming the light in front of him. Still, Raidenmon showed no fear. It bristled with fighting spirit. Bulbasaur shot Dagyu a look, but Dagyu didn't stop it. A little friendly competition within the team could only help them cooperate better in battle later, so long as it didn't get out of hand. A spar will help you learn to work together, Dagyu said, nodding. But be careful. Everyone moved to the makeshift arena. Raidenmon and Venusaur took their positions while Dagyu served as referee. At his signal, Raidenmon launched the first attack. Venusaur stayed composed, meeting the onslaught with unchanging calm while adapting to Raidenmon's shifting tactics. Raidenmon tore across the field, and the sky answered. Dark clouds rolled in and a bolt of lightning slammed down. Bulbasaur reacted in an instant, shielding itself and deflecting the strike so the bolt lost its focus. Seizing the moment, Raidenmon surged forward with Crazy Volt aimed at Venusaur. Venusaur braced, maintaining a luminous barrier, and Raidenmon slammed into the light shield in a burst of electricity. Vine Whip snapped out from Venusaur's side and forced Raidenmon backward. Raidenmon somersaulted away to create distance, then stopped and released a shimmering electric field. Dagyu's eyes widened. For Raidenmon to use and comprehend electric field after evolving meant it had developed a much deeper grasp of electric energy. With the electric field active, all electric attacks would be augmented. How much, though, depended on the Pokémon's mastery over the field. From what Dagyu remembered from his previous life, this was somewhat like establishing a domain, a decisive factor in pushing a fighter's power to the next level. By that measure, Venusaur was at a slight disadvantage. Dagyu had considered teaching Venusaur the green grass field technique directly, but Venusaur refused, and Dagyu wasn't going to force the issue. When Raidenmon released its electric field, Venusaur made no move to stop it. So far, the spar had been almost entirely defensive. Some of Dagyu's training routines weren't appropriate for an internal practice match, so he held them back. Even so, Venusaur's ability to shrug off Raidenmon's lightning-fast strikes made the gap in their power obvious. As a trainer, Dagyu knew what that meant. Venusaur wasn't quite at Gym League strength yet, but it was close. With a deeper grasp of natural energy, promotion would be within reach. Raidenmon charged, and then unleashed a 100,000-volt barrage. Electromagnetic waves, thunder, lightning fangs, and other electric assaults came one after another, but none of them landed. Venusaur parried each strike with casual precision, turning Raidenmon's full-force attacks aside as if they were mere breezes. No matter what angle Raidenmon attacked from, Bulbasaur defended flawlessly and answered every strike with a counter. Eventually, Raidenmon ran out of steam and collapsed to the ground, panting. When Dagyu announced Bulbasaur the winner, he came down to the ring and fed Raidenmon recovery cubes to help him regain his strength. After the match, Raidenmon felt the gap between himself and Venusaur keenly, but instead of being discouraged, his fighting spirit burned brighter. "Big brother Venusaur, I'll catch up to you for sure," he vowed. Kintaro watched with a blank expression, then threw himself even harder into training afterward. The truth was, Kintaro had never been especially gifted. He'd been a farm Pokémon before, and his natural aptitude was limited. Taro never treated him differently for that, though. He gave everyone the same care. Now that the younger Pokémon were beginning to close the distance, Kintaro could only train harder so he wouldn't be left behind. More than anything, he wanted to remain by Taro's side. Dagyu noticed Kintaro's determination, but said nothing. He understood. Kintaro was as steady and composed as anyone there, second only to Bulbasaur. Dagyu promised he would support whatever Kintaro chose to do. He fitted Kintaro with the newly purchased advanced training device and supervised the whole process. The machine's resistance ranged from 200 up to 1,000 kilograms. Kintaro was the slowest to adapt. Every movement felt excruciatingly difficult under the load. When he finally collapsed from exhaustion, Daguyu immediately released the device, helped him replenish his energy, and massaged his muscles until the tension eased. Raidenmon tried to take a turn with the trainer, but Daguyu stopped him. "You're built for speed," Daguyu explained. "If you bulk up too much, you'll just add weight and lose your agility. That will make it harder for you to move quickly and to execute your techniques reliably." Raidenmon had already passed the physical fitness test, so what he needed now was speed work, drills to improve his reaction time and the consistency of his skill activation, turning him into a fast, specialized attacker rather than a brute force one. They trained hard all day. No one came to challenge Daguyu. His reputation and strength had grown to the point that anyone unsure of their abilities avoided confronting him. After dinner, Daguyu went through the usual routine, giving each Pokémon a recovery massage. Once they were settled, he turned his attention to the cube fruit recipes, recalibrating the proportions for the energy supplements to suit each creature's condition. Bulbasaur, Kintaro, and Raiden needed specially tailored blends, and Daguyu worked slowly and carefully. Any hasty change could do more harm than good. Before he knew it, night had fallen. Thundermon wasn't allowed into Daguyu's room, and only the land shark had actually fallen asleep early. The house was definitely getting too small for all of them. Daguyu helped Yuan Lucia straighten his little quilt, switched off the lights, and went to bed. Chapter 24, New Home Expansion, failed. The renovations on the Caterpillar house and the lake were finally finished. The caterpillars he'd purchased later had all been moved into their new homes, one after another, and the forest area had been expanded as planned. With those 3 projects complete, Daguyu picked up the phone and called Uncle Carter to discuss expanding his new home. "Oh, so that's the idea," Carter said. His tone was apologetic. "After we finished the work at your farm in Otani, our company took on another project. If you're not in a hurry, I can handle the expansion once this one wraps up." "That's fine," Daguyu replied. "There's no rush. Wait until your project is finished and then help me with it." "Haha, no problem." Carter sounded excited. "This new job is huge. Our construction team is only in charge of a small section. They're planning a commercial redevelopment. I signed a confidentiality agreement, so I can't tell you more now, but you'll be surprised when you see it." They chatted a little longer, then hung up. Another busy day began. The hard-working Chef Wang arrived in the kitchen early and set to work preparing breakfast. He started by kneading the dough that had fermented overnight into long ropes, cutting them into small pieces, dusting the board with flour, and rolling each piece into a thin wrapper with his rolling pin. With practiced hands, he folded and pleated the first dumplings in no time. Daguyu and the Guanxi siblings were already in the kitchen, shaping dumplings alongside him. This morning, Daguyu had planned a dumpling feast and had even made special fillings to suit each Pokemon's favorite flavors. Roundland Shark had perched itself on top of little Snorlax's head, and the 2 of them lay at the kitchen doorway, noses poking out as they took deep, eager breaths of the cooking aromas. Daguyu smiled at the sight of the 2 greedy little rascals and quickened his pace. Before long, the first pot of dumplings was ready. He asked the Guanxi siblings to take them out and divide the portions so each Pokemon could get their share. Bulbasaur refused to eat. Dagu's breakfast was rich with supplemental energy, and that kind of boost would interfere with the pure, natural energy Bulbasaur preferred to maintain. The effect would have been small, and the food really was delicious, but Bulbasaur used a lot of willpower to turn it down. He finally saved himself the trouble and went outside to bask in the sun. The extra portion was handed out evenly among the other Pokemon. Magikarp, who'd been eating poorly lately, had suddenly ballooned in size, at least 30 kilograms now, a huge bloated carp. The old small tank couldn't hold him anymore, so Daguyu replaced it with a luxurious new aquarium filled with smooth river stones. Daguyu expected Magikarp to evolve smoothly before long. When that happened, the lake behind the house would become his new home. Since it was the first time they'd all tried this novel food, everyone had eaten heartily. The last pair to finish up were Roundland Shark and Snorlax, who'd been roughhousing until the meal settled. After breakfast, Daguyu set to work training Roundland Shark, while Snorlax curled up and slept at his side. The Roundland Shark was indeed a near-legendary Pokémon, carefully cultivated by the Yulong family. Its potential and comprehension are exceptional. That said, like all quasi-god Pokémon, the Roundland Shark has one major drawback. It grows very slowly and is difficult to breed. It's a fair trade-off. If these creatures developed rapidly and reproduced easily, they'd be terrifyingly powerful. The Roundland Shark's core strengths are digging and biting. It also knows Quicksand Hell and Dragon Breath, and its inherited move is Metal Claws. After watching a demonstration of its abilities, Daguyu laid out a detailed training plan. Because it's a dragon type, the first priority is learning to channel draconic energy. Daguyu decided the Roundland Shark must reach at least a proficient level of control with Dragon Breath. That move projects a strong gust at an opponent and carries a chance to cause paralysis. Its raw power isn't huge, but it's perfectly adequate for training, and in skilled hands it can produce surprising effects. Digging is a very practical skill that can be woven into later attack sequences. Used creatively, it will open up unexpected tactical options. Both Quicksand Hell and Metal Claws are worth refining as well. The team will need to master them if the Roundland Shark is to fulfill its potential. Right now, the Roundland Shark's agility still had plenty of room to improve, but its strength didn't need much work. You could tell by the fact that it could move freely, even when the resistance on its training harness was set to the maximum. Daguyu had already removed that harness and, once a plan was decided, began one-on-one training with the creature. He'd set up a makeshift course in the training yard, suspended wooden posts, interference rigs, and other contraptions he'd built specifically for the task. The Roundland Shark treated the whole thing like a game. It would flop over, pat its rump as if laughing, then get right back up and try again. By the end of the morning, the improvement was obvious. The Roundland Shark was already able to dodge the first simulated attack level. Daguyu had designed the equipment based on a movie he'd seen in a previous life, and it worked better than he'd expected. For now, he'd only programmed 10 difficulty levels, simple and straightforward. Level 1 was a single red rubber ball launched at the creature, and level 10 was 10 red rubber balls coming at it all at once. The exercise was simple but brutal, and excellent for sharpening a Pokémon's focus. Each trainee stood in a room while a machine launched bright red energy orbs at varying speeds and angles. The goal was purely defensive: watch, react, and block. It was a discipline in timing and attention. By the end of the session, you could see who had the instincts to survive. Bulbasaur was the only one to clear the 10th round. It moved with calm precision, reading every ricochet and planting itself where it needed to be. Venusaur, meanwhile, demonstrated how a defensive Pokémon could turn a fence into an impenetrable shield. Using Vine Whip with uncanny accuracy, it snapped the tendrils up and out, intercepting orbs from any direction, as if it had built an invisible fortress around itself. No matter the angle of attack, the vines met it. Raidenmon, as expected, was the fastest of the lot, but speed alone wasn't enough. In the final barrage, it was overwhelmed. The orbs bounced relentlessly, pinging off walls and the ceiling and changing trajectory with every collision. Before long, the whole chamber was a storm of red spheres that made predicting a path nearly impossible. Daguyu stepped in with a tip. "Use your electric field," he said. "When it's activated, static charge spreads through the arena. That field lets you sense, even influence, the orb's paths. It takes practice to feel it, but once you learn to read the field, you can anticipate where an orb will go." If Raidenmon could combine that sensing with its raw speed, Daguyu added, it would be unbeatable. The training consisted of 10 rounds of reaction drills, starting slow and growing progressively faster. By the last few rounds, the pace was merciless, a final test of concentration, timing, and the subtle techniques that separated the best from the rest. Daguyu planned upgrades for the attack. Vary the pulse patterns, fast, slow, fast, slow, and then increase the number of red orbs it fired. He even decided to let any trainers who came to challenge use the arena for free. Honestly, I'm such a kind angel, he thought with a crooked smile. The round land shark stared at him in bewilderment, unable to fathom why Daguyu was suddenly grinning so mischievously. Then, without warning, it leapt up and bit him on the head. Hey, Roundland Shark! What are you doing? Get off me! Daguyu cried, grabbing at the creature. He tried to pry it loose with both hands, but it clamped on stubbornly. After several failed attempts, he finally gave up. That afternoon, a trainer arrived to challenge him. Daguyu's strength had improved by leaps and bounds, and now very few people dared to face him. No one in their right mind would seek out an opponent who could take them down in a single move. The challengers who did come were those who had real confidence in their abilities. The battle ended with Otani still victorious, but Otani had come away with a new respect for his opponent. By ordinary training standards, his Pokémon were only serviceable, but tactically, Otani simply couldn't keep up with him. In the end, Bulbasaur was sent in and won the match on pure strength. Moved by that display, Daguyu decided to make an exception. A trainer with that kind of talent shouldn't be held back by a lack of resources. Daguyu didn't hide his admiration and promised to cover all the energy cubes Mingshu would use on his travels going forward. He did give Mingshu a month's supply on the spot, but not the absolute top-tier cubes. That would be too conspicuous. If word ever got out, unscrupulous people might take advantage of him. Mingshu, if you need more cubes later, contact me and I'll have them sent by Tucson Express, Otani said, patting him on the shoulder at the farm gate. Mingshu bowed deeply. Thank you very much, Mr. Otani. I won't let you down. With that, Mingshu took the backpack Daguyu had given him and continued on his journey. Mingshu was born into an ordinary family. Though he'd always had top grades and a natural talent for training Pokémon, his family didn't have much money. They'd scraped together to buy him a single Zubat with excellent breeding stats, but that was all they could afford. Mingshu didn't give up. He poured himself into breeding Zubat, studying the moves of every Pokémon he could and developing new tactics, slowly building his reputation one step at a time. Keeping a full team of 6 Pokémon, however, was more than his finances could bear. That's why he'd come to challenge Daguyu Farm today, mainly for the prize money. Even if he lost, he would at least receive a cube he could sell to tide him over. What surprised him was that, although he was defeated by Daguyu, the farm's owner, Mr. Otani, still rewarded him and offered additional financial support with no strings attached, simply out of appreciation for his skill. Mr. Otani, I won't let you, promised himself. His steps felt steadier as he walked on beneath the blistering summer sun. Chapter 25. Magikarp Evolves. Fat Gyarados? The next morning, Daguyu was eating breakfast when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Mingshu, full of photos and excited descriptions of the scenery and odd little things she'd seen along the road. Daguyu smiled and chatted with her for a while, then set his phone aside and got on with the day's chores. Halfway through washing the dishes, a sudden flash of light made him pause. The Magikarp in the fish tank was glowing, the telltale shimmer of evolution. It flung itself out of the tank with a force that sent water sprinkling across the counter. Daguyu dropped the sponge and hurried out of the kitchen to see what had happened. The light faded, revealing a newly evolved Gyarados, who let out a triumphant roar. Daguyu's first reaction was genuine delight. He was happy for the little fish. But the sight that followed froze him for a beat. The creature was different. It was noticeably rounder than the lean, serpentine Gyarados he'd seen in pictures and games. He tried to be dignified. Don't laugh, he told himself. He clamped his mouth shut and forced a straight face as he went over to inspect the new Gyarados. Up close, everything looked fine. Scales intact, eyes bright, no injuries. The only odd thing was how plump its body had become, as if the evolution had left it a little soft around the middle. Gyarados didn't seem completely comfortable either. The new, bulkier form made movement awkward. It shifted and flexed as if its muscles and belly weren't quite in sync. It gave a disgruntled grunt, part triumph, part discomfort, clearly feeling as bloated and cumbersome as it looked. When he looked down, he couldn't even see the floor. His face, the face that should have been fierce and fearsome, had rounded out, and his eyes were nothing more than thin slits. Gyarados couldn't accept it. He nudged his huge head up against Daguyu, as if begging for help. Daguyu couldn't hold back a laugh. "Ha! It's fine, Gyarados," he said, smiling. "You just absorbed too much energy and puffed up. With daily exercise, you'll slim down again, but you won't be able to live in this room at that size. You'll have to move to the lake behind the house." Gyarados let out a relieved roar. The idea of going out like this was unbearable. He didn't want to be seen looking ridiculous. Daguyu set to work helping him move. At Gyarados's insistence, they even carried his beloved fish tank out to the lake. When the other Pokémon heard that Magikarp had evolved, they came over to congratulate him. Embarrassed, Gyarados kept his head ducked underwater, refusing to come up. Gyarados rested his massive head on the shore while Daguyu stroked it. "All right, let's start with this," Daguyu said. "You can practice swimming and lose weight at the same time. Swim from here to the river and back." Gyarados gave a slow nod, slid into the water, and began to swim. The stretch from Daguyu's lake to the river was about 3 kilometers one way, 6 kilometers round trip. If he did 2 round trips a day and kept his diet in check, he'd slim down quickly. To Daguyu's surprise, Gyarados cared more about his figure than he'd expected. When he wasn't resting, he was out in the water exercising, then working on his moves. A month passed like that. There was progress, just subtle. You wouldn't notice unless you looked closely, but Gyarados didn't give up, and Daguyu admired that stubborn perseverance. Daguyu wasn't fixated on how a Pokémon looked or what it became. He respected what the Pokémon wanted for itself. That afternoon, another challenger arrived. When the match began, Daguyu's first choice was obvious. He sent out Gyarados. The opposing trainer fell silent for a moment, stunned at the sight of the enormous, determined Pokémon. It took the other trainer a long moment to register what had just been released. Gyarados. He laughed. "Ha ha, Mr. Otani, you're really sending something like that to fight me?" "Call it whatever you like," Otani said calmly. "You'll find out soon enough. Send out Yo, our Pokémon." Gyarados answered with a low, furious roar. "Humph. In battle, it isn't the one who yells the loudest that wins. Go, Slither." The opponent tossed out his first Pokémon. Otani frowned. Something about Slither was off. Its eyes were dull, and although its body looked normal, there was a listlessness in its stance that set Otani's teeth on edge. Slither surged forward and unleashed a move called Naughty Bomb, a crackling blast of 100,000 volts. "Gyarados, water cannon," Otani ordered. Gyarados sent out a stream of pressurized water and bubbles. The torrent smashed into the electric attack, neutralizing the electricity, and then struck Slither dead on. The blow left the Pokémon unable to continue. "You trash!" The trainer spat, recalling Slither in a scowl. He threw out another Pokémon. It didn't go any better. Gyarados tore through it the same way. He lost 3 in a row. When Daguyu offered him an energy cube afterward, the trainer refused it without taking it. He stalked out of the farm without a backward glance. Only at the gate did he pause, stare back for a long beat, and then finally walk away. Daguyu had been angered and disgusted by the trainer's attitude toward raising Pokémon. If the man refused to accept his advice, so be it. He wasn't worth Daguyu's time. Once he'd calmed down, Daguyu went back to finishing his chores. Late that night, a shadow slipped onto the farm. Bulbasaur, dozing in the living room, opened his eyes and glanced toward the window. Outside, a large figure crept along the fence, then moved toward the warehouse. Bulbasaur narrowed his eyes, thought for a moment, and silently slipped out of the house to follow. The intruder unlocked and pushed open the warehouse door. Rows of packed boxes filled the space. His eyes gleamed. "Ha! The miser has so many of these blocks, yet he only gave me a few. Tonight I'm going to make things right," he muttered. This was the same trainer who had come to challenge him earlier that day. He released his Pokémon and barked orders. "You lot are useless. Get to work." He snapped, sending them to start hauling the boxes. So focused on the energy blocks and his reward, he didn't notice the heavy footsteps behind him or the hulking shape that had just stepped into the doorway. A vine whip shot out and ensnared the man. Another lash swept across and knocked his Pokémon aside. "Damn it! If I can't have it, I won't let you either. Naughty Bomb, self-destruct," the man shouted. Bulbasaur's eyes narrowed. It lashed out with a vine whip to try to stop Naughty Bomb, but it was too late. The device detonated, and the warehouse blew apart in an instant. Bulbasaur reacted instinctively, using a defensive move to shield those around it. The blast instantly roused Daguyu and the other Pokémon. Raiden was the fastest and sprinted toward the ruined warehouse. Daguyu and the others followed close behind. When they reached the site, all that remained was rubble and chaos. Bulbasaur had the man pinned in front of Daguyu, his mouth covered. "Ibutar, call the police. Now!" someone ordered. "Everyone else, come with me and start searching for survivors. Bulbasaur, keep an eye on him." Otoko moved at once, diving into the wreckage to pull out any Pokémon trapped underneath. Miss Junsha, having received the alarm, raced to the scene and took the trainer into custody. "For people like you, I'll petition the League to strip you of your trainer licenses. Expect to spend the rest of your lives behind bars." Miss Junsha shepherded the man into the car and then walked over to me. "Mr. Otani, this is our fault. Please calculate your losses and the Alliance will compensate you." With that, she drove off with the criminals and the injured Pokémon in tow. I was left speechless. It felt like a disaster falling out of the sky. I was in a foul mood, but there was nothing I could do about it now. I needed to sleep. Chapter 26. Organizing. The next morning, Daguyu and his Pokémon began inspecting the warehouse that had been damaged in yesterday's explosion. The storage racks and most of the equipment were ruined. Daguyu didn't feel angry so much as flat and tired. With the others' help, the mess was cleared quickly. A few undamaged energy blocks were recovered. They were low quality, but still edible, and that would keep them going for now. The supply should be enough to feed the two little ones, the round landshark and Snorlax, for a few days. As they worked, the round landshark suddenly lifted its nose, alert. It followed a scent, eyes brightening, then began furiously to dig. In minutes, it unearthed an odd, irregular crystal. The air filled with a rich, appealing fragrance. Daguyu and the others leaned in and sniffed. It smelled delicious. Without hesitation, the round landshark shoved the crystal into its mouth, intent on eating it. It bit down again and again, but the crystal wouldn't break and it couldn't swallow. The little creature hopped and thrashed in frustration, trying to dislodge or crush the thing with its jaws. Daguyu moved closer, curious and cautious. The crystal glinted oddly in the morning light, and more of the Pokémon gathered around, noses twitching. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't an ordinary piece of debris, and whatever happened next might change how they handled the ruined warehouse and their scarce supplies. Daguyu looked at the plump landshark with a helpless expression, ruffled its head, and held out his hand. The creature obliged and spat the object into his palm. Daguyu didn't mind the spit. He set the irregular crystal in the sunlight and examined it closely. Could it have been caused by yesterday's explosion? The thought nagged at him. There was no mention of anything like this in Duge's notes, but Daguyu already understood enough about cultivation processes to form a hypothesis. The only unusual event in the warehouse yesterday had been the blast. In the confined space, that explosion would have produced extreme heat and pressure, instantly melting the blocks stored inside. The molten material could have soaked into the ground and then resolidified as this strange crystal. He ran through the familiar steps in his head. Making a conventional cube involved purification, centrifugal removal of impurities, and then shaping under high temperature. This specimen, however, looked like the product of intense heat combined with enormous pressure. That fit the explosion scenario. In short, the most purified fruit essence had its invisible impurities driven off under intense heat and pressure, and then condensed into crystals, essentially a high-purity energy crystal. Daguyu held the squirming round landshark down with one hand and stared at the thing with the other. The crystal was colorless and perfectly clear, as transparent as plain glass. There was no sign of any attribute energy in it. Why, he wondered. Could extreme heat and pressure strip away an essence's attribute energies and leave only the raw, original energy behind? Full of questions, he slipped the crystal into his pocket to study later. The round landshark, displeased at being restrained, leapt up and nipped at his head. Daguyu kept working without flinching. After so many bites, he'd learned not to react. He finished packing at noon and went to talk to the station master. He asked the man to postpone the delivery time and to arrange for several large fruit separators, since the fruit needed to be transported as soon as possible. The station master was a shrewd fellow and quickly set about making the necessary arrangements. He had learned about it the day before and had asked Dashi to arrange delivery. Sure enough, not long after, the fruits and machines arrived. Daguyu told Dashi to store them temporarily in the caterpillar house, and that afternoon he threw himself into work there. Guanxi and his sister sat down and tallied the losses. Their rough estimate was that Daguyu had taken a direct hit of 5 billion Alaya ENS coins. The number stunned him, but he forced himself to accept it. He figured the alliance should cover part of the loss. They were responsible for vetting challengers after all, even if he didn't expect them to pay out much. For the next 2 days, he worked non-stop to clear the backlog, taking the webmaster's tacit urgings to speed up as a constant pressure. By the third night, all the outstanding orders were finally finished. Completely exhausted, Daguyu watched Dashi send out the last shipment of cubes, then dragged his weary body back to his room. 5 machines started up at once, and Daguyu even set a new personal record for simultaneous operation. Meals for the past few days had been handled by Guanxi and his sister, which left Daguyu mostly holed up in the caterpillar house working on cubes. The caterpillars were unusually well-behaved and hardly disturbed him at all. I stole some time to check on the metapods and figured they'd be ready to evolve in about 10 days. Daguyu spent the evening soaking in the bathtub with a hot towel over his face. He didn't want to think or move, just rest. I ate a quick dinner and turned in early. The next morning, Miss Junsha deposited 2 billion alliance coins into Daguyu's account. He blinked at the figure for a moment, then realized the large payout was compensation tied to Du's help. Sure enough, a short while later, Du messaged, saying he owed him a meal. Daguyu replied with a smile, "No problem, come eat anytime." Today, he planned to rebuild the warehouse himself. Carter was tied up with other projects, so Daguyu had to take it on alone. Fortunately, it only needed reconstruction on the original foundation, not a complete redesign. He didn't need anything fancy, just something that would work for now. Daguyu placed the orders for materials, sketched a simple blueprint, and waited. The supplies arrived that morning, and with several Pokémon helping, he set to work. By the end of the afternoon, the small storage building was finished. From a distance, it looked like a tidy, square container. Not beautiful, but solid. That was enough for the moment. The rest could wait until Carter returned. Then they could move the machines and the fruit trees into the new place. He put the harvest into the newly bought refrigerator, satisfied that at least the fruit would be safe. Wiping his hands, he headed back to the house. Inside, a red-haired figure lounged on the sofa, calmly sipping tea. The housekeeper came in behind her, carrying a plate of snacks. "Du, what are you doing here?" Daguyu asked, surprised. Du set her cup down without looking startled. "You said I could come anytime." Daguyu ran a hand through his hair. "How was I supposed to know you'd turn up today? I haven't even had a chance to buy any groceries." Du smiled faintly. "Then I don't care." The housekeeper hovered with the snacks, indecisive, while Daguyu and Du exchanged amused looks, the kind of easy domestic argument that meant no real trouble, only company he hadn't expected but somehow was glad to have. "All right, you're only responsible for eating, so you can eat whatever I cook," Daguyu said with a casual shrug, then headed into the kitchen. He wanted to do something exciting, so he went with Sichuan food. No sooner said than done, the kitchen filled with waves of spicy steam that made everyone's mouths water. The steward and his sister carried dish after dish out, sliced boiled pork, spicy diced chicken, mapo tofu, dongpo-style braised pork, and more, until the table was piled high. Each plate gave off an irresistible aroma that clung to the air and teased the nose. Daguyu had also prepared plenty of food for the Pokémon, and Du released his own Pokémon to join in. There wasn't enough room inside, so Daguyu had the butler move the table out onto the patio beforehand. Once they were seated, Daguyu dug in. Du ate with impeccable manners, appropriate for someone from a prominent family, but he didn't savor slowly. His chopsticks moved like lightning. Daguyu watched, pleased. For a chef, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing people enjoy the food you've made. He joined the rest of the crowd that had been waiting for food. After dinner, Daguyu and Du sat in the living room drinking tea while the other Pokémon lounged out in the front yard. Daguyu asked Guanxi and his sister to make some snacks and juice and bring them over. Bulbasaur and Raiden clustered around Du's Pokémon, making little noises as if asking questions. All of them listened intently as the others replied. Daguyu set the crystal on the table, and Du picked it up, turning it over with a curious frown. He couldn't see anything unusual at first. Daguyu explained his theory and asked if Du could help detect the energy concentration and other readings inside the crystal. Du examined it carefully and then put it away with equal care. They fell into an easy conversation. "By the way, Du," Daguyu asked, "who are the people in that group?" "Oh, nothing special," Du said calmly. "Just the regional champions and gym leaders." Daguyu felt suddenly out of place, like a husky who'd wandered into a wolf pack. At that moment, his phone began to buzz wildly. He picked it up and found the chat had exploded. Dufa had been posting picture after picture of food. Daguyu stared at the screen, utterly speechless. "Ugh, damn you. I challenge you to a food duel. Don't you know I've been dieting lately?" Watari typed, half joking. "Watari, you always eat alone. Same as last time. I had to come find you," someone replied with a teasing grin. "Everything looks amazing. Giant of Light, did you make all of this?" another asked. "Yeah, I cook as a hobby," Giant of Light answered cheerfully. The group chat filled with playful banter. Du posted a photo of the spread and didn't respond much to the teasing. He just kept showing off. To him, delicious food wasn't meant to be eaten in private. He liked flaunting it to the others. After lingering in the chat a while longer, he signed off and switched to a private conversation with Daguyu about what they had just discovered. "If my guess is right," Du said, "this kind of crystal should be reproducible. Can you help me design a machine to make something similar? If you do, I'll supply the first units to you." "No problem," Daguyu replied, "but it'll be slow. The Alliance's existing equipment won't do the job. We'll need a Devon company to build a custom machine." "That's fine," Du said. "Just tell me how much money you need." Du didn't dodge the question. He nodded calmly, and they sat drinking tea until late. When Daguyu realized Du had no thought of leaving, he helped him tidy up an empty room. "Stay here tonight," Daguyu said. "I've prepared the room for you." "All right. I don't have anything to do these days, so I can be lazy," Du replied. Daguyu set out fresh toiletries in the room and went to shower. The next morning he was up early making breakfast, and Du woke up at the same time. "Sleep all right?" Daguyu asked. "Not bad," Du answered. He made himself a cup of tea, sank onto the sofa, and sipped it while idly watching TV. Breakfast was noodles with stewed sauce. Daguyu had taken the dough he'd made the day before, pulled it into noodles, cooked them, and rinsed them with cold water. He finished the stewed sauce and prepared a few small side dishes, and a few minutes later, the meal was on the table. Du helped himself, mixed the sauce through the noodles, and began to slurp them down. After breakfast, Daguyu left to start his day, and Du followed along, with no particular plans of his own. After lunch, they kept training through the afternoon. At one point, Daguyu stared at Du, momentarily at a loss for words. "Why don't you go fish in the lake behind the house?" he suggested. He handed Du a set of fishing gear. "Go over to the far side," he said. "Fish for a while, then come back when you're done." Du walked down to the lake with the gear and immediately froze. A Gyarados was drifting near the shore, training in the water. When it noticed someone approaching, it slipped beneath the surface, leaving the top of its head exposed, and watched Du with cautious eyes. Gyarados moved quickly, but Du had seen enough to know he wasn't imagining things. For a moment he nearly laughed out loud. How could a Gyarados be so round? It looked absurdly plump. He shook his head and forced himself to be serious. Whatever the reason, he was here to fish. Du set up his rod and cast his line. After a while, Daguyu strolled up carrying another fishing set and sat down beside him. They fell into the easy silence of two people fishing, the lake rippling gently around the big Pokémon. "By the way," Du said, trying not to smile, "how did you manage to keep Gyarados so fat?" Gyarados was not deaf. The question stung more than Du expected. The big serpent poked its head out of the water and lumbered over. It stuck its giant snout toward Daguyu as if asking for reassurance. Daguyu reached out, ruffled the scales on its head, and let out a dry chuckle. Lots of patience, he said, and a very forgiving diet. I hadn't been paying attention. When he was still a Magikarp, we'd overfed him. The excess energy hadn't been used up, so when he finally evolved, it built up inside him. Didn't you see how he couldn't even walk the first time he became a Gyarados? I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing, something that hardly ever happens. My Gyarados looked even more aggrieved. Dew released his red Gyarados. The red one froze when it saw another of its kind, clearly confused. This is supposed to be a Gyarados too. Why does it look like that? My Gyarados stared at Dew's red one with a hint of envy. All right, you can hang around and train with him for a bit, Dew said to his Gyarados. The red Gyarados nodded, then flicked its eyes toward my Gyarados, signaling for it to follow. They slipped out through the waterway, left the lake, and headed to a nearby river. The two of them spent the afternoon sitting in the current and chatting while they fished. They didn't catch a single thing, but it didn't matter. They were just killing time. After dinner, I went back to my studies, while Dew settled in the living room with a cup of tea and the TV on. After several days of downtime, Dew finally got the call telling him to come back. Dew, weren't you supposed to be back in a day? It's been 3. Are you coming home or not? A voice bellowed through the phone. Dew held the handset at arm's length, listened until the other side finished venting, and then said, I'm coming right away. As always, Dagayu packed him a generous stash of snacks for the trip. Dew mounted his Charizard and left in style. Dagayu didn't bother to fuss over the room. He tidied up a little, closed the door, and let things be. Once the ferry had left with Dew on board, Dagayu's life slipped back into its usual routine. Chapter 27, A Surprising Discovery. A few days later, Dew sent Dagayu a report. It laid out, in meticulous detail, the analysis of the crystal Dagayu had given him. The findings were staggering. The crystal's energy purity tested at a full 100%, completely attributeless energy. In other words, it wasn't aligned to any single type and could be used by any Pokémon. What was more, experiments showed that the energy dramatically boosted the performance of Pokémon at the King level. Even Dew's champion-grade fire-breathing dragon had been curious enough to reach for it, but Dew had stopped it in time. There was only one crystal, after all. Dew was also already in talks with Devon Company to build the custom instrument Dagayu had requested. A decision was expected soon. After that, Dagayu settled back into his routine. One morning, after finishing his chores, he stood looking over the farm's empty plots and wondering what to plant next when Reborn, the Thunder Beast, came tearing up the path carrying the chubby Roundland shark. It squealed and yelped as Reborn rushed past. Are the metapods evolving? Dagayu blurted, dropping his hoe and sprinting toward the caterpillar house. Reborn and the Roundland shark scrambled after him. Dagayu rushed in and happened to witness the metapod's evolution. A dazzling light filled the caterpillar house as hundreds of metapods transformed at once. He knew he would never forget the sight. No matter how many times he saw it, it would always take his breath away. The glow lasted for more than 10 seconds before slowly fading, and when it cleared, hundreds of Butterfree hovered where the metapods had been. An especially large Butterfree, the leader, floated up to Dagayu and gently rubbed its head against him. Dagayu recognized it at once. It was the bold little caterpillar he'd come to know. The leader gathered the others. They circled the room once, then all flew out together. Outside it was summer. Flowers and plants were lush and blooming. The Butterfree played among the blossoms, and even the remaining caterpillars in the house crept out to join them. In an instant, the whole farm seemed to come alive. Dozens of beautiful Butterfree filled the air, a rare sight that would astonish anyone who saw it. I've decided, Dagayu thought to himself. I'll plant a whole field of flowers for the Butterfree. After that, Dagayu left the Butterfree alone and went back to his room. He pulled out the drawing board he'd set up earlier and began to paint. Gradually, the scene took shape. Butterfree and the little caterpillars playing happily on the grass. When he stepped back and looked more closely, he felt very satisfied. Once the painting dried, he framed it and added it to the other works he'd already finished. When he expands the house, he plans to build a studio to display them all. Over the next few weeks, he found time to paint even more. Landshark being mischievous, Bulbasaur looking impossibly cute, Magikarp training with fierce concentration. These images are his precious memories, things he can preserve on canvas and someday share with friends. The Butterfree also brought a new source of income to the farm. The powder made from their scales has medicinal value and sells for 500 Alliance coins per gram. With 200 Butterfree, he can sustainably collect about 100 grams a day without harming them, about 50,000 Alliance coins daily. There's also Butterfree nectar, which Daguyu plans to keep for himself. Desserts are very popular around the farm, and the nectar will be handy for that. With the nectar Butterfree had collected, Daguyu wanted to try making some new snacks. That afternoon, he called a flower farmer through Grandpa Fumin and ordered a large batch of seedlings. When the delivery arrived, he and a group of Pokémon set to work planting. With Butterfree's help, the work went much faster than he expected, and by dusk the whole flower bed was in place. A breeze ran through the field, and the new blooms swayed gently. Daguyu lay back on the grass beside the flowers, letting the tea soak in. Bulbasaur sat quietly by his side. "It's beautiful," Daguyu said, propping himself on one elbow. "We'll protect this place, won't we, Bulbasaur?" Bulbasaur answered firmly, sitting up straighter. The two of them stayed there until the light faded. When it grew dark, Daguyu ruffled Bulbasaur's head, then went inside to start on dinner. Just then Dew arrived, riding on Charizard's back. "Perfect timing," Daguyu said with a smile. Dew calmly declared, "I'm craving Mapo tofu," and, with practiced motions, made himself a cup of tea before settling on the couch to watch TV. Daguyu finished the meal quickly and placed a steaming bowl of Mapo tofu in front of Dew. Dew didn't hesitate. He grabbed a few more spoonfuls of rice and ate. After dinner, Daguyu packed up his things and the two of them moved into the living room to drink tea. Dew set the crystal on the table. The round land shark's eyes lit up. It waddled over on its short legs, pawed at Daguyu's trouser leg, and looked up with a pitiful expression. Daguyu patted its head and handed it the crystal. That gesture made it clear how much Daguyu cared for his Pokémon. He'd give something so precious to one of them. Dew thought to himself that people like this were worth befriending. The farm's quiet, easy atmosphere put him at ease. As a busy man in the Alliance, he found he could finally stop thinking and just relax. "About the instrument," Dew said. "It'll take roughly a month. From what you described, it's still difficult to find a metal that can safely reproduce the force of a large self-explosion inside a sealed chamber. Devon Company does have the material, but it's horribly expensive. They gave me a rough estimate. An instrument like this will cost at least 10 billion Alliance coins. Be prepared for that." Daguyu spat out a mouthful of tea. "Cough, cough! How much?" Daguyu hacked, his nose running. His doting maid handed him a towel while the devoted manservant hurried to mop the floor and bring another cup of tea. Daguyu murmured his thanks. Dew went on, "The price will only go up, not down. A technique as powerful as great self-destruction is very hard to guard against. It's difficult to absorb that kind of blow and keep both the target and the user intact. If you can't afford it, I can fund you privately when the time comes." Daguyu checked his balance. He wasn't short of money. As the webmaster, his business had expanded and demand kept rising. But his production capacity was limited, so prices had crept upward. Daily expenses were huge. Between the two voracious mouths at the Caterpillar house, they only just managed to break even, but he'd still managed to save a decent nest egg. He had always assumed the ceiling would be on the order of a few 100,000 to about 1,000,000 yuan, which was within his means. Dew named a price outright, 10 billion yuan. Daguyu couldn't hold back an incredulous laugh. "I can scrape together the money," he said, cheeks reddening. "I just didn't expect it to cost that much." Dew shrugged. "You're the only cultivator in the Alliance who can mass-produce perfect quality energy cubes. You can't exactly be short of funds." He paused, then added, "Realistically, the budget will probably run between 15 and 20 billion. No one has attempted anything like this before. It's essentially a brand new research project." Daguyu cast a quick, silent glance at his account balance. Fortunately, it was enough. They chatted for a little while longer, then turned in for the night. Chapter 28, Friends of the Round Shark. Daguyu woke early to find the round land shark already up and about. He didn't mind. Ever since the little guy had found that crystal stone, he'd been full of energy, exploring every corner of the farm. Stepping outside, Daguyu took a deep breath. The morning air was unusually fresh, with a slight chill. Butterflies flitted through the flower beds, busy collecting nectar, and the orchard at the back was already being pollinated. Tiny fruit were beginning to swell on the branches. He returned to the house to start breakfast, when the round land shark suddenly barreled into the kitchen and flopped against his calf, letting out a soft, urgent cry. Kuha! Daguyu paused, crouched down, and asked gently, "What's wrong?" The round land shark took his hand with its paws and tugged, insisting that he follow. Daguyu rose and walked outside with it. Not far from the house, he saw a Pokémon lying on the ground, clearly injured. A small group of other Pokémon, Sandshrew, Pikachu, Rattata, and a few more, gathered at a distance, watching warily. Daguyu felt the hair on his arms rise. The round land shark pressed closer to him, motioning him forward as if to say, "We have to help." Daguyu first checked on Zhou Xingkao, Lucao, the little walking grass. It was nothing serious, just a nasty scrape on his leg. He fetched the medicine box, cleaned the wound, and wrapped a simple bandage. "Round land shark, bring Lucao back in a day or two to change the dressing. He should be nearly healed by then." Daguyu patted Lucao's small head. There. The walking grass swayed happily in thanks. Finished, he returned to the kitchen to help the Aiguanchi siblings finish breakfast. Landshark happily ran off to play with the other Pokémon. At first, the visitors were a little shy, but after Landshark showed them around the farm, they relaxed. They watched Butterfree collecting nectar, saw Gyarados working off excess energy, danced around Venusaur, and even rode on Thundermon's back as it ran about. Daguyu waited for a while, but no one came back, so he stepped outside and called them. Round Land Shark suddenly remembered they hadn't eaten yet and hurried off to bring his friends to breakfast. Daguyu had already set out their breakfast on the porch and invited the round shark to eat with them. The friends watched in admiration as the round shark devoured more than anyone expected, and the shark puffed up with pride at all the attention. After they finished, they woke the little Snorlax who had planned to sleep in. He was happy to be roused. He was still young, and playing with friends was more fun than dozing alone. Daguyu stood in the field, smiling as a handful of youngsters chased one another across the farm. He wasn't annoyed. Their energy made the place feel alive. Still, the last few days had been dull. No one had come to challenge the Great Rain in a long time. Ever since the last incident, the town had tightened inspections and become strict, and visits had dwindled. These days, Daguyu didn't have to run the farm by himself. Apart from producing the perfect quality blocks, most of the daily blocks were handled by his brother Aiguanchi, while his sister, Aiguanchi, took care of the household chores. With nothing pressing to do, Daguyu set up his sketchboard beside the flower field and began to paint. He captured the little group of playmates in bright, lively strokes, the way they chased one another through the blooms, the sunlight on their faces. When he laid down the final line, he nodded in satisfaction, carefully rolled the painting up and put it away. By noon, he was preparing lunch and made extra for the Roundland Shark's friends. The youngsters ate with delighted chatter, and watching them only improved Daguyu's mood. They played on until dusk, when the Roundland Shark reluctantly said goodbye and went home. The next morning, the little ones came back by themselves. They weren't the least bit afraid, partly because the food here was so good, and partly because the farm's owner was such a kind man that all the Pokémon trusted him. After finishing his daily training, the Roundland Shark could hardly contain his excitement. He wanted to go play right away. Daguyu smiled, shook his head, and let him go. There was no point trying to push a semi-divine Pokémon too hard now. The important thing was to build a solid foundation. Breakthroughs don't come overnight. They require steady accumulation. True power only shows itself once a Pokémon has fully evolved. What Daguyu hadn't expected, though, was that Landshark would take a whole group of the smaller Pokémon to run dodge drills. The lot of them ended up in a chaotic jumble, but since the exercises were set at the lowest difficulty, it was still useful practice, and everyone got stronger simply by playing. Landshark, meanwhile, showed off a level 3 technique and once again earned the admiration of the others. After watching for a while, Daguyu lost interest in the spectacle and went to help Bulbasaur with its training. Over the course of those sessions, Bulbasaur learned to fully control its natural energy and successfully mastered the green grass field skill. While the field is active, grass-type moves are strengthened and Bulbasaur's endurance is greatly increased. If released on the farm, the field even helps crops grow faster. Right now, Bulbasaur can project the green grass field out to about 5 meters around itself, but Daguyu was confident it would expand with more practice. Reborn also made progress. It developed a deeper understanding of the electric field and grew noticeably more precise in controlling its moves. Daguyu had Bulbasaur use Vine Whip to train Reborn. The Vine proved to be more effective than the evasion trainer device Daguyu had designed. Bulbasaur's control of the move was practically flawless. With his help, Reborn began to improve at a startling rate. Kentaro had already removed his training rig. He'd adapted to the highest setting. In raw power, he could go toe-to-toe with Venusaur. His speed lagged a little, but once he locked into a charge, very few things could stop him. He could even smash through rock. If his anger point activated, his attack strength would spike even further. According to Daguyu's assessment, 3 of the Pokémon had already reached the level expected for the early gym rounds. Each had developed a fixed, distinctive fighting style. Gyarados, however, was still in the advanced training phase. Once he fully assimilated the energy he'd accumulated, it would only be a matter of time before he reached gym standard. I headed to the back to check on Gyarados' progress. The red Gyarados had taught him a lot. His moves had improved considerably, and his weight loss was finally starting to show. At least it was noticeable around his eyes. Daguyu went over to the caterpillar house and found that a new batch of caterpillars had already evolved into metapods. He planned to buy more later, but this time he had to be careful with the numbers. The farm would be taking on other projects soon, and there might not be room to expand. After walking the grounds and finding nothing else that needed his attention, Daguyu headed back to his room. His phone rang. It was Mr. Fumin. "Xiaoyu," Mr. Fumin said. "The summer festival is next month. You should prepare some special products from the farm and set up a stall at the market." "Time flies," Daguyu replied. "The festival's already next month?" "Yes, it's been more than half a year since you came back. The farm is thriving under your management. Your grandfather in heaven would be proud. Honestly, it's all because of you. I wouldn't have this life without your help." "Ha ha. All right. Your good life matters most. I'm getting busy now." Then Mr. Fumin hung up. Daguyu couldn't help but drift into a daydream. As a child, the summer festival had been his favorite event, the stalls overflowing with delicious food, the lively games and trinkets, and even the martial demonstrations that always drew a crowd. He had always looked forward to it. That end, he found himself thinking ahead, sketching out plans for what he could sell at next month's festival. Satisfied with the ideas he jotted down, he finally turned in for the night. Chapter 29. An Unexpected Guest. The morning after breakfast, Yuan Lucia was out in the yard playing with friends when a sharply dressed young man arrived. He hopped down from the back of an armored bird Pokémon and walked to the gate. From inside the house, the plump, round land shark Pokémon cocked its head and let out a curious call. Mr. Otani stuck his head out of a second-floor window when he heard the commotion. He blinked. The newcomer looked strangely familiar. He opened the door and walked down to meet him. "Hello, can I help you?" he called. The young man smiled politely. "Hello, Mr. Otani. My name is Daigo. I've come to discuss a commission." Recognition hit Mr. Otani. Of course, Daigo, the famous gold miner. It was odd to see him here instead of out in the fields. He motioned him inside. "I've heard of you before. Please come in, Mr. Daigo." Mr. Otani led him into the sitting room, poured tea, and set out some snacks. They barely touched them before Daigo got straight to the point. "I need a special energy cube for one of my Pokémon," Daigo said. "It won't do to have a common one. This cube has to be tailored. I'm prepared to pay twice the going rate, and I brought some rare ore as part of the payment." Mr. Otani's eyes widened. Crafting a bespoke energy cube was delicate work, and the materials could be hard to source. He studied Daigo for a moment, and then leaned forward. "Tell me exactly what you need," he said. If the specifications are clear and the materials reliable, we can talk price. Daigo nodded and began to explain, describing the unusual requirements for the cube and why only a specially made unit would work. As they spoke, the land shark Pokémon padded to the doorway and watched the newcomer with bright, inquisitive eyes. An ordinary morning in the house, suddenly feeling anything but ordinary. Otani. Daigo went on to explain, right now, the market price for a custom energy cube starts at 500 watt. Only high-level cultivators can do that kind of bespoke work. If you want an upgraded version, it's about double, around 1,000 watts. They're rich and they don't skimp, but customization takes a lot of time because the maker has to keep tuning the formula. Of course I can pay, Daigo said, puzzled. But how did you get my information, Mr. Daigo? I never told anyone I'm a breeder. Daigo looked apologetic. I'm sorry about that. Some of your partner's cubes ended up in the hands of our Devon company. Anyone who cares to look can trace them back to a general area. Fortunately, you have a close cooperation with the Yulong family, and Mr. Du has vouched for you, so people don't dare to harass you openly. It was through Mr. Du that I learned your exact identity and location. You can rest easy. Other buyers can only figure out a rough region, not your exact identity. Hearing that, Daigo relaxed. Mr. Daigo, which Pokémon do you want me to customize? Can I take a look at its condition? Daigo opened his Pokéball and released a small, metal-bodied iron dumbbell. He was just born, he said, gently stroking the tiny head. The Pokémon trembled happily and squinted up at him. May I touch him? Daigo asked. Of course. Daigo ran his hands lightly over the iron dumbbell, checking its development. He frowned slightly. The Pokémon seemed stunted. Its metal sheen was duller than normal, and it felt much lighter than a healthy specimen. It looked like it had been born too early. It appears this one was born prematurely, Daigo said at last. He has congenital defects. His growth is seriously impaired. He may never be able to evolve. Daigo's expression tightened. It was my fault, he admitted quietly. His egg was damaged because of my negligence. We spent a lot to save him. Daigo didn't press for details. The specific cause didn't change the problem. The important fact was clear. The iron dumbbell's early birth and the damage it had suffered in the egg had left it with compromised qualifications. Even with customization, its chances of evolving again in its lifetime were slim. His lifespan would only be half that of a normal iron dumbbell. Let him stay with me for now, Daigo said. If you don't mind, could I stay on your farm for a while? Daigo asked. Sure, there's plenty of room. Daigo sent his housekeeper sister to help Dawu get settled and clean the room. Then, he ran a detailed inspection of the iron dumbbell with his instruments. The results confirmed what he'd suspected. The situation was serious. The creature was born missing a large portion of its vital energy, which explained its frailty and shortened lifespan. Daigo hurried to the warehouse and set to work building a preliminary regulator block. Its purpose was to replenish the energy missing from birth. In theory, a pristine energy cube could restore that deficit, but this iron dumbbell's energy was unstable and weak. It wouldn't accept a normal infusion. The energy had to be constrained and smoothed, so the regulator would suppress and stabilize the input before delivery. Ordinary Pokémon wouldn't need that extra step, but this iron dumbbell did. It required special adjustments. When the regulator module was finished, Daigo gave the iron dumbbell the first dose. When iron dumbbell caught the scent, it brightened instantly. It teetered over to Daigo's hand and began nibbling at the morsels in little bites. Mr. Daigo, if we want to restore iron dumbbell properly, we'll need a large quantity of magnetic ore, Daigo said. I think you should be able to provide that. Daigo nodded. Of course, the child's safe birth was thanks to a heavy use of those minerals. That won't be a problem. Have your people send a batch over. It doesn't need to be huge. I want to blend the ore into the dumbbell's cubes. All right, consider it done, Daigo replied gratefully. After finishing the cubes, iron dumbbell visibly perked up. It flew with a livelier, more flexible motion. Daigo watched it and allowed himself a satisfied nod. The approach was working. The next steps would be to restore the creature's vitality with magnetic infusion, then correct any physical deficiencies using high-quality cubes. After a period of recovery, it should be back to normal. In the afternoon, Du arrived, accompanied by a small, wide-eyed girl who was peering curiously around the farm. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing special." Someone answered with a smile, and the girl continued her exploration. "I really don't get why you like coming here so much, Du," Xiaochun said, sounding bored. "Stop talking so much. Don't keep mumbling. Don't follow me next time," Du replied calmly. "Humph, fine. If you don't want to come, don't. What's the big deal?" Xiaochun said with a pout, then started humming to herself. Du only smiled. "Hope you don't regret that," he said, and walked into the living room. He gave Daigo a nod, then, completely at ease, made himself a cup of tea, sat down, and took a sip. Dagu, meanwhile, was still watching the iron dumbbells across the room and paid him no mind. It didn't matter. Du could manage on his own. Daigo, Watari, and Xiaochun were snacking together. Daigo and Watari ate with quiet manners, both the product of strict elite upbringing, while Xiaochun, as usual, was carefree. She scarfed a snack down in 2 bites and clearly enjoyed every one. Watari reached for another, only to find it gone. He rolled his eyes at Xiaochun, got up, and went to the kitchen to get more. This time, he came back with a bigger handful, and Xiaochun proceeded to eat even more. By the time she realized it, Xiaochun couldn't eat another bite and reluctantly pushed her plate away. Daigo and Du sat back, content, while she sprawled on the sofa with a painfully full stomach, a clear sign she'd overeaten. Dagu glanced over at her and didn't know whether to laugh or be concerned. He quickly called his steward, who brought some digestion medicine and helped Xiaochun sit up properly. After a little while, the medicine took effect, and Xiaochun felt much better, though she didn't dare touch any more food. She finally understood why her half-brother Du loved coming to this unassuming farm so much. The snacks were dangerously good. No matter how much she ate, she could never get tired of them. Dao's family was efficient. That afternoon, they quietly hauled the required ore to Daguyu's farm by truck. Once Daguyu added the ore and prepared another dose, he offered a second piece to Iron Dumbbell. This time, the creature took it eagerly. Daguyu watched closely and ran a few checks with his instruments. Iron Dumbbell's condition had improved slightly, though not dramatically. With a few more tweaks, Daguyu expected the treatment to be more effective. That evening, Du and Xiaochun stayed for dinner. Daguyu had prepared a spread of dishes, specialties from his past life, and they were irresistible. Daguyu himself came from a wealthy background and had sampled all kinds of food, but even he was taken aback this time. All 3 of them felt the same way. It was unbelievably good. They didn't bother saying it aloud. Their mouths were too busy eating. By the end of the meal, they were all stuffed, so they popped some digestive medicine and flopped onto the sofa to watch TV. Daguyu, however, couldn't fully relax. He kept referring to the recent physical exam results, tweaking his formula, and tasting it again and again, scribbling notes as he worked. Chapter 30. Comics. The next morning, Daguyu and Du were sitting in the living room, chatting. The toy iron dumbbell had already been taken outside to play by Roundland Shark. The little boy's problem wasn't something that would be solved in a day or two, so nobody was in a rush. Daigo and Du were deep in conversation about the company's recent business, and Otani didn't get a chance to get a word in. The topic eventually shifted to film and television. As a large conglomerate, Devon Company had fingers in many pies, including Devon Film and Television, which had produced several notable works in recent years. Otani suddenly remembered how bored he'd been lately and mentioned that he'd been adapting and drawing the Digimon from his previous life. Circle-like loved what he'd done. He and Snorlax were always pestering Otani to update every day. The main change Otani had made was the setting. He'd moved the story from Earth into the Pokémon world, but otherwise the characters and plot were largely the same. Daguyu told Watari and Daigo about the adaptation, and Daigo, intrigued, asked to see it. Daguyu went upstairs and came back with one of Otani's sketches. The paper was a little wrinkled where Land Shark and the others had handled it, but the drawing itself was still complete and clear. Knowing Land Shark, the only things that survived his rough handling were the ones he actually liked. At first, Daigo was only mildly curious, but the more he watched, the more fascinated he became, until he was quietly hooked. Watari, equally curious, slid in beside him. He found the plot engrossing and thought-provoking, full of emotional texture and moments of real connection. It was, he decided, an excellent piece of work. Daigo didn't feel the need to read every page, so he handed the book to Watari and let him finish it. "Mr. Otani, are you planning to publish this? It's fantastic. People would love it," Daigo said earnestly. Otani scratched the back of his head and laughed. "Nah, I just drew it for fun. I even made up a song to go with it," he said sheepishly. At Daigo and Watari's insistent requests, Otani pulled out his guitar and began to play. Apart from Pokémon, Digimon was one of his favorite anime, and he launched into the Digimon theme, an old classic that fit the mood perfectly. Song title, Butterfly. Gokigenfly ni natte kirameku ni ride te. I want to become a happy butterfly and ride the shining wind. Today's Suga kimi ni ai ni ikou. Kitto thoberu sa. I'm sure I can fly. When the last chord faded, everyone broke into spontaneous applause. Daigo was the first to stand, clapping enthusiastically. From the upstairs corridor, Xiaochun, in pajamas, propped on the rail, cheered and clapped along. "Wow, Otani-san, I didn't expect you to sing so well," she called down. Otani grinned and shrugged. "Ha, it's just a hobby I picked up to pass the time." "That's incredible," Daigo said, eyes bright with admiration. "I knew you were exceptional at training, but I never imagined you had this level of musical skill too." Du nodded in agreement. "With a song like that, the anime adaptation of the manga wouldn't be short on a theme," he said. "It has the right melody and heart, perfect for opening or ending. Otani-san, we should talk about the rights to this piece. Devon Company will definitely give you a sincere offer," Daigo said. Otani nodded. "I trust you on that, Daigo, but I have one small request." "Go ahead. When it comes time to publish, could you please not use my real name?" "Of course, no problem." Daigo smiled. "Pick a stage name. You can use it for any future releases." He sounded relieved to have a simple solution. Later, after Otani had changed into something more comfortable, Xiaochun kept pestering him to teach her the song he just sung. He obliged, singing it for her several times. "Butterfly. That's a good title," she said when he finished. "Does it mean a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon?" Otani just smiled. "How would I know? I'm nothing but a shameless plague, iarist." "I get it," Xiaochun said. "So the song is called Butterfly to tell people that if they work hard, they can break free from their cocoons and become something beautiful. Mr. Otani, you're incredible. You can write songs, draw pictures, cook amazing food, and you're an excellent breeder too, unlike some people who seem to do nothing but fight." She punctuated the last jab with a glance toward Du, who was sitting nearby nursing a cup of tea. Du blinked, looking thoroughly confused. Why did he suddenly get involved? I rolled my eyes at Xiaochun and sipped my tea. Daigo finished the contract with practiced speed. Mr. Otani didn't even glance at it before signing his name. He handed the music scores and the comics to Daigo, who carefully tucked them into a box. Then the whole group began to wander around Mr. Otani's farm. When we reached the flower field, dozens of butterfree were drifting among the blooms. For a moment, I was genuinely moved. Mr. Otani really did love butterflies, I thought. This was the first time Daigo and Xiaochun had a proper chance to meet. They'd bumped into each other a few times before, but never spent any real time together until now. Mr. Otani spread a picnic blanket and set up a small folding table. We'd come prepared, so lunch was quick to lay out. He told everyone to sit and eat, and even made sure there was some for the Pokémon. Wataru's, Daigo's, and Xiaochun's Pokémon all got their share. So, surrounded by people and Pokémon, we enjoyed a warm, cheerful meal. Mr. Otani couldn't help but show off a little here and there, and Daigo proved the same. He took dozens of photos and uploaded them to the group chat. He was careful about the timing, though, so none of the pictures showed the sudden heavy rain that had passed through earlier. A moment later, the chat lit up with reactions. One message, full of question marks, read, "Daigo, what's wrong with you?" "You've picked up some bad habits from @MysteriousMiner," someone teased in the group chat. "Ugh, Du, you and Daigo are the worst," another replied. "There are so many delicious things we can't try because of you two. Just wait, I'll sneak away next time and come find you in Johto." "We'll talk about food once you're out," came the calm answer. "It's really good. Too bad you can't taste it," the first added with a teasing grin. "Damn you. came a flustered, half-laughed protest. Daguyu hovered on the edge of the conversation as usual and watched the banter with quiet amusement. Wataru and Daigo ignored the teasing and went on eating, not bothering to show off how much they enjoyed their meal. That afternoon, everyone went down to the lake to swim. Xiaochun splashed happily, staging water fights with Land Shark and the others, while Daigoto and two companions dozed on lounge chairs by the shore, soaking up the sun. It was one of those rare, uneventful days when all Pokémon training and work were put on hold, so everyone simply relaxed. Nearby, little sister Ibutan sat quietly poring over a recipe book beside Daigoto, while her older brother Ibutan read through the training notes Daigoto had compiled. The lake, the sun, and the easy company made for a peaceful, perfect break. I reached for the juice on the side and took a leisurely sip. Ah, this is the kind of day I wouldn't trade for anything, not even for a god. A week later, Daguyu received the full set of comics Devon Entertainment had sent. The first volume had just been released, and Devon had moved fast. Word was an animated adaptation was already in production, and the song Daguyu wrote would be used as the theme. He was offered 5% of all future revenue from the property, a generous cut that would earn him a tidy sum with little else required, so he accepted without hesitation. After all, he knew there would be plenty of expenses down the line. As soon as it hit the market, the comic became a hit across the Alliance. Children adored it, and a surprising number of adults enjoyed it too. Thanks to strong word of mouth, the first print quickly sold out. On day one, some 300 million copies were sold at 30 Alliance coins apiece. Factories ran flat out to meet demand, and Devon's massive promotional campaign, with advertisements plastered all over the Alliance, certainly helped drive the extraordinary sales. The release did spectacularly well on its first day. Daily sales quickly climbed past 4 billion, and Daguyu watched in quiet amazement. This was moving faster than his cube business ever had. He thought about all the great animations he'd remembered from his past life. If he adapted them and teamed up with German companies, it could really take off. He made a mental note to try that later. In the meantime, with Daguyu's help, Tieling's health kept improving. He was still full of energy at that age, and once the aches and discomfort faded, he was back to playing with the other children, including Yuan Lucia, who was something of a little king among them. Dao was relieved and pleased to see how well Tialing had recovered. Dao decided he needed to be away for a while and asked Daguyu to look after the boy. Tialing barely seemed to notice when Dao told him he would be gone for a time. Dao forced a small, rueful smile, mounted his armored bird, and was gone in an instant. Soon all that remained was a tiny black speck on the horizon. Daguyu watched him go for a moment, then turned back to his own work. Carter called Daguyu to say his part of the project was finished and he could come help expand the house. Daguyu told him about the warehouse, and with both of them working on it, the caterpillar house kept growing. It had now reached the point of self-sufficiency. After covering daily expenses, it was already turning a healthy profit. Because incoming caterpillars would receive the same attentive care they were used to, further expansion was entirely feasible. At that point, Daguyu had 2,200 green caterpillars. Each one produced about 1,000 grams of silk thread per day. The silk was sold in 500-gram units at 300 yuan apiece, so a single caterpillar generated roughly 600 yuan in silk sales each day. That income from silk alone was substantial, and on top of it there was additional revenue from Butterfree scale powder. There weren't many Butterfree yet, so income was only around 150 million for the time being. Daguyu's plan was to increase the number of caterpillars in the caterpillar house to 5,000 and stop there. After that, he would focus on internal selective breeding, letting them reproduce naturally, choosing the best from each generation, and gradually raising the caterpillar's growth potential. Once he and Carter had finished negotiating the details of the renovation, Daguyu started packing his essentials. He intended to live temporarily on the farm lawn while the house was rebuilt. It was summer, the days were hot and the nights warm, so he figured he might as well treat it like camping. The next morning, Carter arrived with a crew and began the work. Watching the old house come down bit by bit made Daguyu a little wistful. but he pulled himself together and kept busy with smaller tasks around the farm. During that period, Mr. Fumin even offered him a place to stay, but Daguyu politely declined. He was standing in front of his tent, making lunch, when he heard Carter's laughter before he saw him. Carter came up grinning and called out, "Daha! Long time no. Long time no see, Mr. Carter," Daguyu said with a smile. "Hey, where's your daughter?" "She's already set off on her own," Carter replied with a sigh. "She says she wants to become a master of coordination. The kid worries me to death." "Having dreams is a good thing," Daguyu said, a little moved. "If you don't spread your wings and fly while you're young, you won't be able to later." Carter nodded. "It's not that I don't support her chasing her dreams, but I'm reluctant to let her go. I keep wondering if she's eating properly out there." Daguyu rolled his eyes. "Just call and ask, then." Carter scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. "I used to call too often. She stopped answering me." "She's probably ignoring you because you're bombarding her with calls," Daguyu said, not sure whether to laugh or groan. They chatted for a while longer, then Carter went off to supervise the work, and Daguyu got back to his own business. Time flew. Before they knew it, a month had passed, and it was already July. The weather had been getting hotter by the day. Fortunately, the house expansion was finally finished, and Daguyu couldn't wait to move into the new place with all the Pokémon. The house was larger and more open now. It even had a music room, a studio, and a study. It had everything they needed. Bulbasaur and Gyarados would be able to move in too. Even if dozens of Pokémon their size showed up, the place wouldn't feel crowded. Daguyu had also installed central air conditioning, which made staying inside much more comfortable. The next day, Daguyu went into town with Ai Guanxi and his sister to buy a lot of supplies for the new home. They picked up household items and groceries, firewood, rice, cooking oil, salt, and a few other essentials. Dashi usually gave them a lift into town, but since it was a rare shopping trip, they made a big haul and walked around until the afternoon. When they felt they had enough, they headed back to the farm. They were planning a barbecue that evening. Du showed up uninvited, with a little boy trailing behind him named Xiao Chun. Everyone gathered to skewer the meat, light the fire, and start grilling. It was a rare, easygoing day for Daguyu, so they even opened some beer and prepared to relax and enjoy themselves. Daguyu started by chilling the beer in an ice bucket, then set to work at the grill. Besides the usual skewers of meat, he cooked scallops and a medley of vegetables. With practiced hands and a sprinkle of his secret spice blend, the scent of barbecue soon wafted through the yard. Everyone found themselves licking their lips. When the grilling was nearly finished, Daguyu began to plate the food. Soon the table was piled high with barbecue, plus snacks, desserts, fruit, salads, and cold drinks. He lifted his glass, caught Du Xiaochun's eye, and made a toast. To tomorrow. He downed his beer in one gulp and dove into the feast. The party stretched late into the night. After everyone helped tidy up, they washed and went to bed. Daguyu, pleasantly drunk, looked around at his companions, Du Xiaochun and all the Pokémon, smiled contentedly, and murmured, "I'm so happy to have you by my side." Chapter 32. Summer Festival Begins. Panlin Town was unusually lively that morning. Farmers from the surrounding countryside had poured into town, lining the square with stalls piled high with their produce. Tree-ripened fruit, fresh goat and cow milk, and every kind of vegetable and berry you could imagine. Brightly painted handicrafts and woven goods hung from awnings and poles, and the whole marketplace glittered with color and noise. Daguyu arrived with a small crowd of Pokémon and joined the bustle. The housekeeper, the woman everyone affectionately called Sister, wandered from stall to stall, buying gifts for each of her friends and thoroughly indulging her love of shopping. Tourists and merchants threaded through the throng, adding to the festival's already boisterous atmosphere. The summer festival was Panlin Town's biggest annual celebration, aside from the New Year, and it drew visitors from far and wide. The day was filled with events, battle exhibitions and coordination shows, food stalls and games. At night, fireworks would paint the sky. This year, the mayor had arranged something special and invited Daguyu to take part in the battle demonstration. Daguyu's opponent would be Guanglai, a veteran trainer from Changpan City. Guanglai was well known on the circuit, a powerful competitor who had entered many courts conferences and had once made it as far as the top 4 before being knocked out. The mayor had one request for both trainers: do not end the match too quickly. He wanted a battle that would show its full intensity, something the crowd could really enjoy. Daguyu and Guanglai nodded in agreement, then used the remaining time to rehearse. Word had spread that the mayor of Tokiwa City and the region's gym leaders would attend the celebration and make speeches. It was a major event for the surrounding towns. Good publicity would boost the local economy and count as a political success. When Daguyu heard that the Tokiwa gym leader had returned, he nearly walked out. As a time traveler, he knew all too well what that meant. The Tokiwa leader was a true powerhouse early on, an absolute champion-level opponent nicknamed the Sakaki of the Earth. His ace B-drill was infamous, capable, according to rumor, of felling a third-stage god with a single strike. Then Daguyu reminded himself, he was just an ordinary farmer now. There was nothing to fear unless his identity as a breeder were exposed, and even then, how much could it matter? No matter how strong someone was, he was still only a breeder. There was no reason to make a scene. Even so, he couldn't entirely shake his unease. He knew better than anyone the effect of the block he'd set up, and that knowledge left him uncertain. The serum had no side effects and reliably boosted a Pokemon's stats and abilities. It even had a measurable effect on quasi-god-level Pokemon. Given that, why not keep a low profile and slip away once the fight was over? Daguyu considered that option, but the more he thought about Sakaki, the less it made sense. Sakaki was hiding very deep. He had infiltrated most of the Alliance's senior ranks. There was no realistic way to expose him quickly. Trying to play it secretive now would be a losing gamble. If the Rocket Team's commanders could move fast and deal with the problem, Daguyu could hold out until reinforcements arrived. With that in mind, he calmed himself and focused on what needed to be done. He and Guanglai resumed their practice. After watching Venusaur in action, however, Mitsuyori decided extra rehearsal was overkill. With Otani's strength, they could take the fight head-on. Otani had no objections, though protocol required he clear it with the mayor first. The two of them went to explain the situation. After thinking it over, the mayor agreed. He scheduled them for the first match so that, even if the bout ended quickly, they could make up time later. The celebration officially began at 9 o'clock. First came the mayor's speech, which ran about half an hour, then the gym leader took the stage. Daguyu, seated far back in the crowd, caught sight of a face he knew too well from his previous life. Sakaki stood on the platform with a warm, practiced smile. There was nothing to suggest the man was secretly the Dark Lord of Kanto's underworld and the leader of Team Rocket. To anyone who didn't already know him, he looked like a stately but kind gym leader. In truth, Sakaki's formidable charisma did all the work for him. In 30 minutes, he had the whole square energized. People were laughing, clapping, caught up in his speech. Afterwards, a group of officials took their places in the viewing stand beside the battlefield. The mayor courteously insisted that the two distinguished guests from Changpon City sit in the center, while he and the others sat at their sides. Staff circulated with trays of fruit, snacks, and tea. The mayor sampled one of the treats, his eyes lighting up, and turned to Sakaki beside him. "Mr. Sakaki," he said with a delighted smile, "where did you find these? They're excellent." "Sakaki, you have to try this year's cakes. They're excellent." Despite his private dislike for the mayor, Sakaki couldn't refuse the invitation. He took a piece and bit into it. His eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. It was genuinely good. As the longtime leader of the Alliance and the so-called Dark Emperor of the Kanto region, Sakaki had tasted countless delicacies, but these pastries were unexpectedly delicious. He found himself taking another piece, then another, and sipped his tea. Suddenly, the tedium of attending a dull civic event felt much less oppressive. Seeing that his important guests were enjoying themselves, the mayor hurried the staff to bring out more. He had been clever enough to ask in advance who in town baked well, and had personally arranged to buy from Mr. Otani. He privately congratulated himself. Currying favor with these two would certainly be advantageous. "Heh, heh," the mayor said aloud, amused. "You two don't know. These cakes came from a farmer in our town. Mr. Otani's baking is unique around here. It's a pity he only makes them in very small batches and rarely sells beyond our village." Sakaki merely smiled and took another bite. The mayor beamed, satisfied, imagining the goodwill the gesture would earn him. Otani focused most of his energy on running the farm and didn't sell the cakes outside the village, otherwise his business would be booming. "If you two like them, I'll speak to Mr. Otani later and have some made for you to enjoy on your way back," the mayor offered. "Then Mr. Sakaki and I won't be polite about it." "Ha-ha!" the mayor joked. Pastries weren't a big deal. He accepted readily, and Sakaki smiled and thanked him with a few polite words. They chatted while the crowd milled about. When the mayor saw the time was nearly up, he called everyone to attention and announced the exhibition match. Trainers Otani Yu and Mitsuyori stepped forward together. The referee explained the rules. A 3v3 match, one Pokémon on the field at a time, and the battle would be decided when an entire team could no longer continue. "Go, Turkey Warriors," one trainer shouted. "Come out, Kentaro," the other replied. A coin toss was displayed on the huge screen above the arena. Portraits of Guanglai and Daguyu spun into view and then slowly came to a stop. The portrait of Daguyu landed in front. The announcer at ringside confirmed the result. The left side would attack first. The match began. Daguyu took the initiative. "Kentaro, mind hammer," he barked. The opponent answered by sending out a fire-fighting Turkey Warrior. As a general-type Pokémon, Kentaro's only strict weakness was fighting, but years of training had made him massively strong. Just looking at his bulk told you he wasn't easy to topple. Guanglai didn't underestimate him. Type matchups weren't everything. "Turkey Warrior, bounce!" the opponent ordered. The Turkey Warrior coiled its legs and rocketed skyward. Kentaro lost sight of it, left standing in the center of the field and scanning warily. "Kentaro, watch your back! Raging that bull, now!" Daguyu shouted. Kentaro charged, and the Turkey Warrior dove like a falling shadow. Their attacks met in midair with a thunderous clash. Both Pokémon were shoved back, skidding, then sprang apart. Kentaro answered with a blinding beam. "Destruction, death, light!" "Avoid close combat," one trainer called, trying to keep distance. "Then we'll go close," Daguyu replied. "Close combat, now!" Kentaro and the Turkey Warrior closed in on each other. For a long stretch, the two battered and parried, neither able to gain the upper hand. At last, the engagement broke apart as the battle split into two separate skirmishes, the field erupting into a flurry of new clashes. As the fight went on, Daguyu began to feel that something was wrong. The Turkey Warrior was getting faster, accelerating with each pass. Quick battles demand quick decisions. Kentaro seemed ready to bet his life on one. There was a soft bounce as the Turkey Warrior sprang. If it kept accelerating like this, Kentaro would soon be overwhelmed by its speed. There was no better option. He had to wait for the instant the enemy came close and try to finish it with a single, decisive blow. The Turkey Warrior dropped down from behind Kentaro again. Kentaro met the bouncing attack head-on, and his counterstrike landed as well. Both combatants reeled and staggered apart. White smoke curled around Kentaro's body, the unmistakable sign that his rage acupoint had triggered. Its effect, when struck in the vitals, his physical attack power rose by 6 levels. "Now!" Kolai shouted. He was a high-level trainer too, so he recognized Kentaro's rage point immediately. "This is our chance. Finish him. Kentaro, go all out, even if it costs you your body." He hadn't expected his luck to be this bad, that his previous strike would trigger whatever it was. "Hold on," one of the Turkey Warriors barked, sliding into a defensive stance and trying to lock Kentaro down. Guanglai, however, still underestimated the force behind Kentaro's attack. The hold barely lasted before Kentaro broke free. The Turkey Warrior managed a sideways dodge, but Kentaro's horns grazed one arm, leaving it badly injured. "Circle the field, buy time, and look for an opening," Guanglai ordered. The arena's boundaries limited the Turkey's options, so their only choice was to kite him and wait for a chance. The Turkey Warriors answered by moving faster and faster, their motions blurring into afterimages. Kentaro didn't chase them. He planted his feet and watched, alert for any sudden strike. The tactic was obvious. Swift hit-and-run attacks, one strike, then retreat, never committing to an all-out fight. Kentaro couldn't land a solid blow. Frustration built until he was literally bouncing on the spot. "Calm down, Kentaro," someone cautioned. "Feel it with your heart. Don't let anger cloud your judgment, Daguyu shouted from the sidelines. Kentaro heard him and forced his anger down. His eyes were bright red, his breath snorting out in short bursts. The turkey warrior across from him was cautious now. The sacrificial charge a moment ago hadn't hit him squarely, but the brush of it had left one arm numb. With Kentaro's strength, a single clean strike would be enough to put an opponent out of the fight. They couldn't be careless. On Mitsurai's orders, the turkey warriors began a series of quick hit-and-run attacks, one strike each, then back away, never engaging in a prolonged clash. Kentaro breathed slowly to steady himself, letting his emotions settle, and tuned his ears to the slightest changes in the air. "Now, horn attack," Daguyu called. Kentaro moved. He slipped in behind the turkey warrior and drove his sharp horns into its flank. The creature screamed, was launched backward, and hit the ground, unable to continue fighting. Daguyu let out an involuntary laugh. "Wow, this is really exciting." Otani stayed calm in the face of the danger and ordered, "Kentaro, one strike. Finish it." The host explained from the sidelines that the turkey warrior could no longer continue. The crowd had the last moments of the fight and applauded. The referee inspected the fallen Pokémon, confirmed it was unable to battle, and announced the result. Otani had taken the first match. It was Mitsuhara's turn to send out the next Pokémon. "Come back, Turkey Warrior. You've done well. Go, Super Armored Rhino." A huge, armored figure lumbered onto the field and let out a thunderous roar that echoed up into the sky. "Since you lost the last round, you go first." The commentator shouted, and Mitsuhara wasted no time. Super Armored Rhino, high temperature and heavy pressure. The Rhino charged its attack with a deafening bellow. The move was unavoidable. There was no way to dodge it. Kentaro had only one option. Kentaro, Ultimate Impact. Two titanic moves smashed into each other. The sheer mass of the super armored Rhino combined with the raw, crushing force of high temperature and heavy pressure was terrifying. Opposing it, Kentaro's Ultimate Impact struck with devastating power, a mighty assault, but one that carried a severe side effect. Because of that last desperate move, Kentaro couldn't do anything the next turn. No attacks, no items, no switching out, no escape. The technique came with an anger bonus that made its power terrifying. For a heartbeat, the two Pokémon were locked in a stalemate, but Kentaro couldn't hold on and was driven to the ground. Rhydon, meanwhile, wore a grimace of pain before stepping back. Kentaro had been rendered unable to continue. The referee confirmed the knockout and signaled Daguyu to send out a replacement. Daguyu withdrew Kentaro, murmuring, "Thanks for your hard work, Kentaro. Come back." Then he called, "Gyarados, go." A huge blue shadow filled the field, and Gyarados' Intimidate flared. The super-armored Rhino's attack fell by a level from the effect. Mitsuyori's face tightened at once. He recognized at a glance how dangerous this Gyarados was. "The loser goes first," Mitsuyori barked. Daguyu didn't hesitate. "Gyarados, use Rain Dance." Chapter 33. The End and the Beginning. The 7-day celebration passed quickly. The farmers who had set up stalls left with new partnerships and agreements with merchants from other regions. The harvest during the Great Grain Rain had been good too, but production capacity was limited, so orders were fewer than anyone hoped. On the final day, the market packed up and everyone returned to their farms. The next morning, the mayor arrived with a retinue to inspect the area, and Daguyu braced himself. He'd been told the mayor would be coming, and that his farm would be the first stop. Though inwardly uneasy, Daguyu greeted them with a practiced smile. Fortunately, all the necessary preparations had been completed a few days earlier. Daguyu stood at the mayor's side, like a small, invisible presence, answering questions politely, never overstepping, never offending. The mayor led his group of alliance officials on a tour. Then they sat in the area Daguyu had set aside to drink tea, sample snacks, and rest. Throughout the visit, Daguyu kept his composure, responding to everything asked of him. The mayor and his party paid particular attention to the Caterpillar House as they continued their inspection. The Green Caterpillar House was enormous, home to some 5,000 Pokémon, many of which had already evolved into Metapod. Butterfree was among the first 200 residents to arrive. Because Daguyu had given everyone a heads-up beforehand, the Caterpillars, Metapods, and Butterfree paid little attention to the new visitors and went about their own business. After an hour of wandering through the gardens and rooms of the Green Caterpillar House, the group was ready to move on. Deguayu handed each person a bag of snacks he had prepared in advance, something the mayor had asked him to do the day before, and promised to reimburse him for later. With snacks in hand, the group climbed into the car and drove off. Deguayu finally let out a sigh of relief. He had cleared the warehouse beforehand, a necessary precaution. He'd never taken the breeder certification exam, and what he was doing with the coins was technically illegal, so it had to be kept quiet. Still, the episode was a reminder that he needed to deal with the issue properly. He resolved to ask Du if he knew any way to solve it. Du replied quickly. He couldn't hand over the certificate himself, but he would vouch for Daguyu so Daguyu could take the advanced breeder's exam directly. With his current training skills, passing shouldn't be a problem, Du said, and the earliest test would be at the end of the year. Daguyu thanked him and got back to work. He'd just finished adding 2 floors to the new warehouse and had moved the block-making area down to the basement. The last incident had made him more cautious. You shouldn't go looking to hurt others, but you have to be on your guard. In the quiet of the basement, he set to making blocks with practiced ease. Halfway through the morning, Du called again. The equipment was ready in principle, and he would deliver it himself. After hanging up, Daguyu continued working until lunch. Du arrived on time, leaping down from the back of a fossil pterosaur. Scheherazade carefully set a strange, unfamiliar device on the ground. Daguyu came out to inspect it and told Scheherazade to take the instrument down to the basement. Scheherazade let out a disgruntled sigh before obeying. After Daguyu took out a box of specially made cubes, Scheherazade immediately dug in with obvious delight. Du felt a little embarrassed. He really was hopeless, but he couldn't scold him, so he sat down and started eating too. If Scheherazade had known what Du was thinking, he would probably have shot back. "You're no different from me. What right do you have to criticize?" Once lunch was over, Daguyu and Du couldn't wait to go down to the basement. Du produced a thick instruction manual, and Daguyu read it carefully. After about half an hour, he had the operations steps down. He walked through the procedure in his head, then methodically checked every part of the machine. There was no room for mistakes when lives were at stake. Satisfied that everything was in order, he set up Thundermon as the power source and prepared to run the first experiment. He poured the specially prepared high-purity fruit puree into the rounded device. The machine looked like a globe. Its spherical shell was cast in one seamless piece with no gaps. With Bulbasaur's help, he placed the lid on and tightened it completely. Then he powered the instrument up. Thundermon began to discharge steadily beside the power unit, and Daguyu had a large basin of cubes ready for it so it could replenish its energy as needed. The glass sphere at the heart of the apparatus began to rotate slowly at first, tipping upside down, then faster and faster, until it blurred into an afterimage. Daguyu lay on the operating table below, fingers busy with fine adjustments as he monitored the activity inside the sphere. When the temperature matched the target level, Daguyu acted without hesitation. The sphere stopped its vertical oscillation and settled into a horizontal spin. Gradually, the core began to condense, the machine simulating the original conditions and filtering layer by layer. For 3 hours, the device ran its cycles. Finally, the rotation slowed and came to a complete stop. A small, transparent bead dropped from the discharge channel and rolled along the track to Daguyu. He snapped on a pair of gloves, held the bead to the light, and inspected it. It was crystal clear. He sniffed it and, which he did more out of habit than necessity, tasted a minute trace. It reminded him of the previous sample, only smoother and more refined. "So, was it a success?" Du asked as he stepped closer, curiosity written on his face. Daguyu shrugged. "I'm not sure. Let Scheherazade test it." Watari signaled to Scheherazade. The creature approached carefully, picked up the bead with practiced tenderness, took it into his mouth, and swallowed it in 2 quick motions. Daguyu asked Scheherazade about the sensation. Scheherazade shrugged. "It didn't really have a smell," he said, "but when he tasted it, it felt cool and refreshing." A few moments later, a gentle warmth spread through him, like soaking in a hot spring. Outside, Daguyu put Scheherazade through some light training. As they worked, Daguyu finally noticed a telling sign. Charizard's raw power was undeniably at champion level, but it had been stuck for a long time. During the drills, Charizard himself felt the old bottleneck tremble, just a little, and that made them both quietly pleased. Dagayu voiced his tentative conclusion. The crystal they'd used must be an extremely pure form of energy. From what he could tell, its known effect was to break through a blockage and strengthen the body's foundation. Because it was pure and without an elemental attribute, that energy was easier for a Pokémon to absorb. But there was a risk. Every Pokémon has its own elemental balance, and absorbing too much neutral energy could dilute that balance and produce harmful side effects. Later, Charizard reported an odd sensation, like air leaking out of him. Dagayu interpreted it as the excess energy dissipating. The crystal had packed a tremendous amount of energy. Some of it was now bleeding off because the body couldn't hold it all. After all, it was a highly concentrated extract of the tree fruit. Dagayu had poured a lot of effort into producing even this small amount for the experiment. Now was the time to intensify training so everyone could absorb as much of it as possible. Du didn't stay long. He prepared to return to the Yulong household with Charizard so he could give Charizard special training. Dagayu watched them go, then set about cleaning up his basement and preparing doses for the rest of his Pokémon. He knew he couldn't have them simply chew and swallow the extract the way Charizard had. They weren't strong enough yet. The safer method was to turn the concentrate into small pendants and amulets for them to wear, letting their bodies absorb the essence slowly. Later, Dagayu contacted the station owner who managed the trees and bought a large amount of fruit. He also sent Butterfree out to collect a portion himself, leaving the remainder for the wild Pokémon to forage and eat. Chapter 34. Good News and Bad News. The next day, the berries Dagayu had ordered arrived in successive batches. He and a team of Pokémon worked together to carry them down to the basement. Fortunately, when the basement had been rebuilt, it had been made much larger and wider than before, just enough to hold all these berries. Still, Dagayu knew he'd be busy for a while. Although there were a lot of berries now, they were all the same variety, and the total amount wasn't huge. It was probably just a single production run. He decided to give the new crystal they'd been developing a name, Supercube. The name was a little ironic. Despite the cube in its title, the thing itself was perfectly round, but it fit well enough. Meanwhile, Du kept sending training data, one packet after another, and the results were impressive. Charizard's stats improved slightly across the board. The gains were modest. This was a champion-level Pokémon after all, and every % of progress had to be earned, but any improvement at that level was significant. Dagayu spent the afternoon concentrating on harvesting and consolidating all the fruit from the trees. By the time he finished, it was already dark. He sat down to dinner in the living room. Little Snorlax was happily munching at his own meal when a soft glow began to emanate from him, the telltale light of evolution. Dagayu felt a rush of happiness and a pang of worry at the same time. Snorlax was already a prodigious eater. If he grew even larger, mealtimes were going to get a lot more expensive. What would it be like if it evolved into a Snorlax? When the glow of evolution finally faded, a Snorlax was sitting on the ground, blinking its small, confused eyes. It noticed it was a bit taller, shrugged, and went straight back to eating. It finished the portion Dagayu had set out in just a few bites, then turned to him with a sorrowful, squinting expression. Dagayu pressed a hand to his forehead. He was about to pay for his own mistake. He went to the warehouse and brought out another supply. Before he could hand it over, Snorlax snatched the bag, ripped it open, and downed it in a single gulp. Then it looked at Dagayu expectantly. Cold sweat ran down Dagayu's back. He'd known Snorlax could eat a lot, but this was ridiculous. That bag contained a full 500 kilograms of highly compressed rations, specially made by Dagayu for the two big eaters, Landshark and Snorlax. And now Snorlax had consumed an entire bag in one mouthful. "All right, if that's how it's going to be," Dagayu muttered. He called the other Pokémon over. "We'll do this together. I'm not about to let you go hungry." Dagayu set to work, tearing through bag after bag. Snorlax ate like a machine, ruthless and relentless. By the time he'd finished half the warehouse of compressed rations, he belched contentedly and flopped onto the floor, squinting his eyes in satisfaction. Landshark was having a blast, bouncing on the makeshift trampoline that was Snorlax's belly. The sight made Dagayu restless with the urge to join in, so he scrambled up too. Snorlax didn't mind at all. He grinned like an idiot and even pushed them higher. After a while, Dagayu lay down on Snorlax's stomach. He'd heard that a Snorlax's belly was comfortable, but he hadn't expected it to be this good, softer and more soothing than a mattress. He played for a bit longer, then climbed down and sat in a chair to rest. But you couldn't judge Snorlax by appetite alone. Despite his love of food, his combat ability was top tier. 2 moves were indispensable: sleep and roll. Sleeping boosted Snorlax's survivability, restored stamina, and cured status effects. Rolling compounded damage with each hit. And when the fight demanded it, he could bring out his heavy hitters, Heavy Bomb and Billion Impact. Those moves fit Snorlax's nature and would effectively boost its output. They raise its offensive and defensive capabilities in different ways. Curse to raise attack and defense, Sleep to shore up special attack and special defense, and powerful moves like E, Earthquake, Crunch, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, and Tarzan Overwhelm to expand its physical coverage. In particular, pairing the Recycle move with the Gluttony ability would dramatically increase Snorlax's endurance. Combined with strategies that keep it asleep when advantageous, its staying power could become terrifying. The only remaining question was Snorlax's hidden ability. "We'll see in tomorrow's battle," Dagayu said. He guessed it was Thick Fat. The next morning, Dagayu recruited Bulbasaur for the test. Snorlax was still asleep, so Bulbasaur simply used Vine Whip to lift the big fellow out of the room. Dagayu woke Snorlax and explained the plan. Snorlax scratched his head and nodded, saying he understood. After testing, they confirmed Snorlax had the Thick Fat ability. Dagayu felt a little disappointed. Gluttony would have been even better, but he quickly adjusted. Thick Fat reduces damage from fire and ice-type moves, and besides, Snorlax already had very high special defense. That combination would make it much harder to take down with special attacks. Now that Snorlax had evolved, Otani arranged a formal training schedule. Snorlax didn't object. So long as it could eat its fill and stay close to Otani and the boss, it was happy. After work every day, Dagayu trained with Bulbasaur and the others. They split into groups. Bulbasaur and Shark paired together, while the rest trained in rotating pairs to simulate elimination matches. To keep things fair, Bulbasaur and Shark acted as the defending team, and the others took turns challenging them. They trained hard for several days, and the improvement was obvious. Dagayu also took the time to craft a super cube and attach it to each Pokémon. Since he didn't administer it directly, the boost wasn't instantaneous. But over time, each Pokémon gained noticeably more energy and endurance. No matter how long the training sessions ran, they never left him truly exhausted. A short rest was enough for a full recovery, so Dagayu could push himself to the limit without worrying about long-term fatigue. What actually wore him out was the daily recovery massage. Fortunately, the Aiguanshi siblings were on hand to help with that. A week later, Du returned and asked if Dagayu could make a super cube composed purely of dragon energy. Dagayu thought it over and experimented with other attributes first. After several painful failures, he finally succeeded. It turned out to be relatively straightforward to strip away unwanted attributes completely. The hard part was retaining the attribute's purest energy. Even with the system's assistance, he had failed multiple times before this success. Once he had it working, Dagayu agreed to help. Du said he would do his best to gather a batch of soursops and would come back when he had enough fruit to try making the super cube. Then he left. Dagayu found himself amazed by the family's legacy. The amount of fruit required to make a super cube grows dramatically, the purer you demand the attribute to be. For example, one fruit could yield about 50 milliliters of juice, but after a series of purification processes, only a tiny fraction of that remained. To make the highly concentrated puree needed for a super cube, you'd have to use an enormous amount of fruit. Fortunately, the Yulong family had been breeding dragon-type Pokémon for generations, so they ought to have plenty of soursops. Dagayu didn't have to worry about sourcing them. His only job was to turn the fruit into puree for Du. Over the next few days, he noticed that, ever since that one huge meal, Snorlax's appetite had settled back down. 2 packs of compressed rations were enough to fill him now. Apparently, the extra energy the Pokémon had stored during its evolution had mostly been burned off, which explained the earlier binge. Dagayu let out a quiet sigh of relief. If Snorlax had kept eating like that every day, his current income wouldn't have been able to cover it. Chapter 35. The Battle Frontier Zone opens at your doorstep. I woke early on a summer morning, opened the window, and breathed in the warm, insect-filled air. Birds chirped in the trees and the grass whispered in the breeze. Feeling refreshed, I went to wash up, then headed downstairs to make breakfast. The round land shark was already awake, happily rolling on Snorlax's belly. Bulbasaur was stretched out, soaking up the sun on the lawn. Raidenmon wasn't in sight. He was probably at the training ground, doing his own thing. Gyarados has been shedding weight every day after all that hard training. His bloated face has slimmed considerably, and at least he can open his eyes now. With each workout, his muscles are starting to show beneath the remaining fat. Kentaro munched leisurely on the grass while I finished cooking. I called the others to eat through the window and asked Landshark to go fetch Raiden for breakfast. Landshark gave a cheerful reply and, with his short legs pumping, ran off toward the training ground. The moment someone mentioned food, Snorlax stopped being sleepy and was the first to shuffle into the living room and sit down like an obedient guest. Not long after, Thundermon returned with the round Landshark perched on his back. When everyone was in place, Daguyu announced it was time to eat. The next morning, after breakfast, Daguyu set out for work. He noticed a flyer sticking out of the newspaper box by his door, so he pulled it free and scanned it. He frowned. Battle Expansion Zone? There was already a battle frontier in the city. Why open another one way out here? Wouldn't it lose money in such a remote spot? He decided to put the thought aside for now and promised himself he'd look into it after work. Folding the flyer away, he started his day. After lunch, Daguyu climbed atop Kentaro and rode slowly toward the advertised Battle Expansion Zone. When they arrived, he was surprised. Far more trainers than he expected had already gathered there. He remembered the Battle Expansion Zone in the Johto region, just west of Asagi City, but he hadn't expected to find one on the outskirts of Tokiwa City. Putting the pieces together, Daguyu had a good idea what had happened. The mayor had clearly wanted something to show for his term, so he persuaded investors to build a battle frontier expansion here. He'd poured a lot of money into it to boost his political credentials. Daguyu had only ever seen the battle frontier in the anime in his previous life, so he didn't really know what to expect. The flyer explained that each sub-area had its own frontier brain, and that visitors collected stamps to redeem rewards. Some prizes were ordinary, but the most coveted ones required defeating every frontier brain. The different sections, the Battle Factory, Battle Arena, Battle Dome, Battle Pipeline, Battle Palace, Battle Tower, and Battle Pyramid, were scattered across the Kanto region. The whole complex was owned by someone named Yoshida, and the rules for each area were notoriously intricate. Skimming the rules, Daguyu noticed one thing that stood out. You weren't allowed to use your own Pokémon. Competitors had to battle with Pokémon provided by the Battle Frontier itself, a rule designed to keep things as fair and impartial as possible. There were tickets for sale at the entrance, apparently one of the venue's main sources of income. Daguyu wondered how much subsidy Tokiwa City had poured in to get a battle frontier established here. Yoshida was a figure shrouded in mystery, at least in the anime. Otani didn't know much about him either. He only remembered a portly man who always wore sunglasses. The rumor was that Yoshida had created the battle frontier to advance battle techniques and encourage more variety in matches. In short, he was a person of influence. There weren't many people around today, but Daguyu knew trainers came here year-round. Battle points could be exchanged for all kinds of prizes, and long winning streaks brought additional rewards, reasons enough for many modestly funded trainers to make frequent trips to the frontier. Daguyu took a quick scan of the sprawling grounds. It would take a long time to inspect all the trainers and booths in a place this large. Once he'd seen enough, he swung back into the saddle of Kentaro and headed for the farm. It looked like many more challengers would be passing by in the future. The trouble didn't seem urgent, but he knew he'd have to stay alert. Most trainers were decent, good-hearted people. There were exceptions, the kind of bastard Daguyu had run into before, but they were rare. Back at the farm, Daguyu went over the frontier battle with the Pokémon. Bulbasaur perked up at the idea of another fight, but once Daguyu explained the rules, that in that particular match you could only use the Pokémon supplied by your opponent, Bulbasaur's enthusiasm evaporated. After reminding everyone of their roles and giving a few instructions, Daguyu went back to his chores. When he reached the flower field, he found something unexpected. A small, rare Johto Pokémon he'd never seen around here before. It was a Huabebe, a tiny flower Pokémon, wandering among the blooms with a worried look, poking at petals and sniffing the air as if something important were missing. "Hello there, Huabebe? Are you in trouble?" Daguyu asked softly. The Bebe squealed and darted behind a blossom, trembling. When it saw Daguyu wasn't a threat, it cautiously stuck its head out and repeated, "Bebe, Bebe." Tears glistened in its eyes as it chattered, the little sounds full of distress. Daguyu listened and, bit by bit, understood. The Bebe didn't know how it had come to the farm. It had woken up to find its most beloved flower gone, and after searching for a long time, it still couldn't find it. The helplessness in that tiny face tugged at him. Daguyu had wandered into the flower meadow by accident, looking for a bloom he liked. When he found Huabebe hesitating among the petals, he smiled. "Of course it's fine, Huabebe. Pick whichever one you like," he said gently. Then he stepped away for a moment and returned with a small, perfectly formed fairy energy cube, which he handed to her. Huabebe hesitated a little, then accepted it carefully and nibbled at it with obvious delight. The cube tasted wonderful. For a little while, her worries simply melted away. After she finished it, her mood brightened noticeably. Daguyu stayed with her without a trace of impatience, patiently guiding her through the rows of flowers. At last she found one she loved, a bright red bloom. Huabebe hovered close to the pistil. With a soft flash of bioluminescence, she lifted the pistil and the whole flower, carrying it up with her. Happy, she rubbed against Daguyu's cheek. Daguyu cradled the tiny flower gently. "Huabebe, do you like it here? Would you like to live with me?" he asked. Huabebe hesitated for a heartbeat, then happily circled him, chirping, "Bebe, Bebe." Daguyu laughed softly. "That's wonderful. From today on, you're a member of our family." He scooped her up and, holding the red flower carefully, walked home with her. "Everyone, this is Huabebe. She'll be part of our family from now on." All the Pokémon greeted Huabebe with excited calls, and she shrank back a little, hiding behind Daguyu. The housekeeper smiled and stepped forward to speak with her. Slowly, Huabebe relaxed and gave the Pokémon a timid hello. "I'll protect you here from now on," declared Roundland Shark. Daguyu crouched down and gave him a playful swat on the head. Roundland Shark didn't even flinch. He just stared up at Daguyu with a puzzled look. "She's the youngest sister on the farm now," Daguyu said. "You'd better protect her and don't you dare bully her, understand?" Roundland Shark thumped his chest with his short hands and promised solemnly that he would protect Huabebe. Still, Huabebe's favorite was Venusaur. She felt safest staying close to her. Bulbasaur now had a grassy field available around the clock, and thanks to the Super Cube's endurance, stamina wasn't an issue. The grassed area kept spreading larger and larger. Before long, it would likely cover the whole farm. Chapter 36, Yoshida's Visit. The next day at noon, Du arrived at Daguyu's farm with a heavy-set man wearing dark sunglasses. Before Daguyu could speak, the man strode forward with a broad grin. "I'm Yoshida. Sorry to drop in unannounced, Mr. Otani." Daguyu blinked, a little puzzled by the different names, but recovered his composure. "Hello, Yoshida. I've heard about you. Please, come in." Inside the farmhouse, Iguan laid out tea and snacks for everyone. The brothers and sisters settled around the table, curious about their guest. Yoshida wasted no time. "I've heard Mr. Otani's energy cubes are exceptionally well made. I'd like to place an order. Some basic, intermediate, and advanced cubes. And I want some perfect grade ones as well." He popped a snack into his mouth as he spoke. His eyes brightened and he reached for another. Daguyu glanced at Du, who gave a small nod to signal that everything was fine. "How many do you need?" Daguyu asked. Yoshida laughed and waved a hand. As many as you can produce. There are a lot of Pokémon in our development area that need training. Dagyu felt a flush of embarrassment at the scale of the request, but he kept his expression neutral. The offer was flattering and potentially very lucrative. Seeing Dagyu's embarrassed expression, Yoshida hurried to explain. I'm not asking you to make them just for me. I can buy high-quality blocks elsewhere. You're the only one who can produce perfect quality blocks in bulk, but demand for that level won't be huge. Those perfect blocks are mainly given as exchange rewards and as bonuses for boss fights. The quantities involved are small, so it won't interfere with your life. Dagyu visibly relaxed at that. The order was small, and with Du acting as guarantor, there shouldn't be any problem. With Du as witness, both parties signed 2 copies of the contract. After the paperwork, Otani invited Yoshida and Du back to his home for lunch. They accepted without hesitation. By the time they arrived, the pastries on the table had already been snaffled by Yoshida. Watanabe kept a composed expression, but inside he was on guard. This man ate a lot and might become a fierce competitor. Soon a lavish spread was set before them. Yoshida couldn't wait to sit down. Du took his seat with composed grace. After exchanging a few polite remarks, they began to eat. Yoshida took 1 bite of the Beijing-style shredded pork and immediately burst into tears. Wow, this is amazing. Mr. Otani, I'll definitely be your friend, he sobbed, then dove back into the plate. He ate like a man starved. Du was more composed, but he wasn't slow either. The meal was over in no time. Yoshida ate so much that he could barely move afterward. A maid produced a prepared digestive tonic and coaxed it down him while Watari sat back, leisurely sipping tea. It took Yoshida a long time to recover. He nursed tea, made small talk for a while, then at last took his leave. Dagyu walked him to the door and watched him go slowly toward the training grounds before returning inside. Watari, is there really nothing wrong with this fellow Yoshida? Dagyu asked when they were alone. He's the sort of man who always thinks about profit, Watari said. But his character is sound. He's trustworthy. Dagyu breathed a sigh of relief. Du and Dagyu chatted briefly, then Du excused himself. He had business to attend to. He mentioned that the shipment of sugar apples was still being gathered and would take some time to complete. Then he was gone. After the 2 visitors left, the farm fell back into a peaceful hush. Dagyu went down to the basement and made a super cube for Huabebe. Not long after, he returned and settled at the edge of the flower field. Huabebe was playing among the blooms with a group of butterfree. Dagyu called softly from the path. Bebe? She looked up, a little puzzled. He set the super cube on her, and she sighed with contentment, curling up happily and settling on top of his head. The leader of the butterfree watched Dagyu with obvious longing, and gave a small, disgruntled sound. Then, clearing his throat as if to be formal, he added, Ahem, I'd like one too. Dagyu felt his face warm. He'd admittedly paid too little attention to the butterfree lately. Granting the leader's request would be expensive, over 5,000 coins, and even more troublesome. It would take a lot of time. It wasn't the cost that bothered him so much as the fact that he wouldn't have a moment to relax afterward. Still, he agreed. The butterfree leader wasted no time spreading the news among his companions. The flock took it as great tidings and erupted into a joyful whirl. 200 butterfree took to the air together, a shimmering, swirling spectacle above the flower field. Over the next few days, Dagyu worked overtime, producing supercubes and attaching them one by one for 200 caterpillars. He'd promised that when the caterpillars evolved into butterfree, every one of them would have a supercube. The nursery erupted in excitement. The caterpillars suddenly seemed in a rush to evolve and claim Dagyu's gift. Seeing them so eager made all the long hours feel worthwhile. Pokémon were simple. They didn't care about the finer points of what a supercube could do. They just wanted Dagyu's present. Besides, the caterpillars had been on the farm so long that they considered it home. They hoped to evolve quickly so they could help protect the place, even though the farm was safe for now. A few weeks after finishing that work, Du finally gathered all the soursops and brought them over himself. In the basement, Dagyu was bent over his equipment, sweat beading on his forehead. Crafting a pure dragon supercube was far more difficult than he'd expected. Fortunately, with the system's help, he was able to calibrate everything with absolute precision. It took a full hour before a golden, lens-like sphere fell out of the device. Dagayu picked it up and examined it. There was a dragon mark engraved inside. At that point, it no longer looked like an energy shard, so much as a token or prop. He put the supercubes into their box and kept working. Du had brought a large supply of soursops, enough to make 6 supercubes, as if he intended to teach every main player a lesson. Dagayu spent another 5 hours finishing them all. He hadn't been this tired in a long time. By the time they got home, it was already late. The Guanxi siblings had left dinner out for Dagayu and Du, and the two of them devoured the meal. Afterwards, Du released all the Pokémon and helped store the supercubes one by one. Every Pokémon looked comfortable and satisfied. When he finished, Du had no intention of leaving. Dagayu rolled his eyes. He knew Du all too well, and there was nothing to be done about his shamelessness. Since a room had already been set aside for him, Dagayu went to wash up. After a refreshing shower, Dagayu flopped onto the sofa and turned on the TV. A bulletin came on the screen. There's a poaching ring active in the Johto region. Residents should be careful, the anchor warned. Poachers? They're not coming all the way out to my farm to steal caterpillars, Dagayu said lazily. Du just rolled his eyes. Don't forget you also have a land shark and a Snorlax, Du replied. That got Dagayu's attention. Land sharks are not easy to come by, and while Snorlax isn't unheard of, it's still a prized catch. Poachers don't care whether a Pokémon has an owner. They'll snatch whatever they can and sell it for cash. You can't be too careful. Where people live and work, there will always be those willing to take extreme risks for profit. Even the prospect of prison won't stop some of them. In the whole Pokémon world, the most ruthless villain, and the one who left the deepest impression on Otani Yuying, was Hunter J. Wu, the poaching gang you mentioned, isn't that Jay? Du asked, surprised. Wu shrugged. I've heard the name. Dagayu spoke up. Jay is a woman the Alliance has attacked several times, but she always gets away without a scratch. She's very strong. If you run into her, will me immediately. At your current level, you wouldn't be able to handle her. Du nodded. They chatted for a while after that, Du venting about the outrageous behavior of some of the Alliance's stupid officials. Dagayu mostly listened, chiming in occasionally with his own opinions. Because of memories from his past life, Du sometimes found Dagayu's remarks surprisingly insightful. After thinking them through, he realized they were often quite practical. After all, the Alliance was a great nation. In the last few thousand years, it had only briefly fallen from prominence. For most of that time, it had been a dominant power on the world stage. It might not be the very best at everything, but it was stronger than most. Dagayu hadn't studied the topic in depth, but as someone who'd lived in that country, he knew that a few basic strategies, tweaked to fit local conditions, still worked in the Pokémon world. Du immediately lit up and launched into a stream of explanations, eager to share what he'd learned. Dagayu, though, couldn't follow most of it. Eventually, he grew too sleepy to keep listening, gently nudged Du back into his room, and went to bed. Chapter 37. The long-awaited door-to-door challenge. With the battle frontier completed, trainers from nearby regions came pouring in to check it out. Dagayu had no intention of joining the fray. He wasn't short on resources and didn't want to compete for them. It was nearly September. The days were still warm, but the mornings had a touch of coolness. He had recently closed a deal with Yoshida, which meant he'd been making energy blocks every day. Fortunately, Guanxi could now produce energy blocks on his own, so he'd taken over the elementary and intermediate batches. Dagayu only had to make the advanced and perfect quality blocks. That noon, Dagayu had just finished his quota for the day and was coming up from the basement when he noticed a trainer sitting on his front steps. She stood to her feet as he approached and bowed slightly. Hello, Mr. Otani. My name's Hina. Are you accepting challenges today? She asked timidly. Of course, Dagayu said gently. If you're not in a hurry, let's have lunch first, then we can fight. Hina flushed and bowed again, clearly embarrassed. I'm sorry to bother you. Have you eaten yet? Dagayu hesitated for a moment. I haven't, he admitted. She brightened. Then let me buy you lunch. I'll take my chance after we eat, if that's all right. Sounds good, Dagayu replied with a small smile. Let's go. I've eaten. Okay, I'll finish up soon. Go sit on the sofa for a while. Daguyu didn't overthink it and went straight to the kitchen to make lunch. Bulbasaur and the others had already been fed. The housekeeper had taken care of them, so Daguyu only needed to prepare his own meal. The smell of cooking drifted through the house while Sheena settled on the sofa, scolding herself for coming so early. She should have timed it better. Not long after, Daguyu emerged with a bowl of fried rice. He sat at the dining table and began to eat. When he finished the last spoonful, he looked up at Sheena. "Sheena, where did you travel from?" "From Goldenrod City in Kanto to Viridian City," she replied. "I heard you were accepting challenges from intermediate trainers, so I wanted to try my luck." "Oh, that." Daguyu set his bowl down. "I'm sorry, that notice was something I put in the paper earlier. I got caught up with some things and never had the chance to take it down." He brought over a plate of snacks and pushed it toward her. Sheena hesitated, then took a bite of a small cake. The flavor was unexpectedly wonderful. The tension left her shoulders as she relaxed a little. "Then, Mr. Otani, could we have the battle now?" she asked, regaining her composure. "Otani, are you not going to accept the challenge?" Hina asked. "That's not it," Daguyu replied. "It's just that my current partner is basically at the level of a high-ranking trainer. Oh, and there's a little one, too. If you can beat him, I'll call it passing the challenge. How's that?" "Really? Are you sure that's allowed?" "Doesn't matter. I set the rules." Daguyu laughed. "I decide." He walked down to the lake, where the round land shark was splashing in the shallows, and explained the arrangement. When the shark heard they were about to battle, he thumped his chest confidently and said it was no problem. The terms were laid out, 1 versus 3. Any one of Hina's Pokémon that could defeat Sharknado would count as a win. "Challenger goes first," Daguyu added. "Send out your Pokémon, Hina." Okay, come on out, walk on grass." Hina threw her Pokeball with force. A small, cute Pokémon popped onto the field. As it appeared, Zulukau's voice rang out across the arena with dramatic energy. "Walk on grass. Leech Seed." Daguyu froze for a moment. Leech Seed was an egg move, something a Pokémon could only learn by inheritance. That meant this little walk on grass must have been bred to know it. "Roundland Shark, use Dig," Daguyu ordered calmly. Sina didn't panic, just a little flustered. "Walking Grass, Poison Powder." A cloud of purple dust drifted out from Walking Grass. The Roundland Shark lunged straight at it, knocking the little plant Pokémon aside as it dove underground. It popped back up into position a moment later, purple specks clinging to its scales. It was poisoned, but barely phased. Sina withdrew Walking Grass and sent out another Pokémon. "Sylveon, go, Fairy Wind." Daguyu couldn't help but admire the girl for a second. She'd used Walking Grass to probe and sap some energy with Poison Powder, then followed up with a Fairy-type attack that naturally countered Dragon types. Clever, creative. Still, he had no intention of yielding. "Roundland Shark, Dragon Breath." Dragon Breath met Fairy Wind head-on in a clash of swirling energies. "Sylveon, use Fairy Wind again," Sina called. "Stomp again," Daguyu snapped, and the Roundland Shark reared up to bring its heavy foot down. "Get out of the way, Sylveon," Sina shouted. Sylveon leapt nimbly aside, avoiding the shockwave from the stomp, and landed lightly a safe distance away. "Sylveon, use Swift. Dig!" The Roundland Shark vanished into the earth, sliding away from the streaks of star-shaped light Sylveon sent out. Sylveon spun, alert, but the Roundland Shark suddenly burst up from behind her and slammed into her side. Sylveon yelped in pain. "Sylveon, Iron Tail!" Sina snapped, reacting instantly. Sylveon's metal-coated tail struck the Roundland Shark full-on, sending it tumbling through the air. When it landed, the little shark lay motionless, poisoned and unable to continue. Mr. Otani, Daguyu, recalled it at once, then laughed and clapped his hands. "Very clever tactic," he said, giving Xena an approving look. No, Mr. Otani, you're obviously favoring me," Sina began, blushing. Mr. Otani chuckled. "Not at all. Roundland Shark did its best, but his trainer here is too playful and never takes training seriously. I just took the chance to give him a good lesson." "That's..." Sheena sputtered, still flustered. "Don't worry, I'll keep my promise." Mr. Otani produced a small package he'd been saving and handed it to her. "Consider this your reward, and if you ever need energy cubes, you know where to buy them. Come to me." "Okay, thank you, Mr. Otani," Sheena said softly, accepting the gift. After he watched the shy girl leave, Mr. Otani pulled out his phone and dialed the newspaper. If Hina hadn't come to challenge him, Dagayu would have forgotten about it entirely. Her visit reminded him of the classified ad he'd placed, so he called the newspaper and told them to pull it. He hung up, then paused, rethought things, and called back. This time changing the ad to require advanced trainers instead of intermediates. You have to put pressure on yourself, he told himself. Even though he was technically a high-level trainer now, he still felt raw compared to the veterans. The only way to get sharper was to fight stronger opponents. Back at home, he tended to the round land shark's wounds. The little beast healed quickly, but its mood was sour. It had been beaten badly in its first real match. How could a farm bully like that accept such a loss? Dagayu chuckled and ruffled its head. If you don't train harder, you'll lose when you step into the ring. What's the point of sitting here and crying about it? Coo! The round land shark replied, and a small spark of fire flared in its eyes. Next time, I'll definitely avenge my humiliation and get back my reputation as the little bully of the farm. The round land shark tugged at Daguyu's pant leg, eyes bright with fighting spirit. He let out a determined snort. Daguyu grinned. Ha, that's what I like to hear. But you can't quit halfway through practice like last time. How about we make a bet so you won't chicken out? The round land shark hesitated, then squared his shoulders and nodded. All right. Deal. Daguyu's smile went sharp. If you give up halfway like before, you'll have to skip a meal every time. Agreed? And to seal it, we have to make it official. A high five as an oath. He held out his hand. The round land shark wavered for a long beat, then clenched his teeth and leaped up slap-eye-ing Daguyu's palm with a hard, noisy smack. For the sake of his pride, he couldn't back down now. Chapter 38. The Difficulties and Hardships of the Round Land Shark. Being the smallest resident of the farm, the round land shark was thoroughly spoiled. It wasn't only Daguyu who doted on him, Bulbasaur and the others did too. Who could resist a mischievous, energetic little brother? Daguyu felt a twinge of guilt about his own favoritism, and that indulgence had made the round land shark a little too complacent. Left unchecked, his natural talent risked going to waste. Fortunately, the battle from the day before snapped him out of it. He came away with a renewed fighting spirit, and suddenly training didn't feel like such a struggle. Daguyu had tried pushing him into discipline before, but the shark's rebellious streak was strong. The more Daguyu glared or scolded, the more the youngster would deliberately dig in his heels, like a stubborn child. It frustrated Daguyu, and eventually other matters forced him to step back and let the situation cool. Besides, Daguyu didn't really want to force any Pokémon to train against their will. He knew what it felt like to be coerced, and he couldn't bring himself to do the same to someone under his care. So for now, he let the round land shark find his own way, hoping that the lesson from the recent fight would be enough to keep him moving forward. After yesterday's failure, the round land shark finally seemed a little clearer-headed, a hopeful sign. Daguyu decided to seize the moment and use it to establish some good training habits. The next morning, he pulled out the training plan he'd prepared and began. They started with warm-ups and basic conditioning, which were easy enough for the blunt, sturdy land shark. Then they moved on to simulated combat. Daguyu set it up so land shark only had to defend. Thundermon moderated the attacks carefully, always keeping the intensity within what land shark could reasonably handle. By noon, the little creature was panting and covered in new scrapes and bruises. He sagged against a rock, every muscle screaming, and his eyes said he wanted to quit. Daguyu came over, all syrupy politeness. "Oh, look, is this our farm bully? Giving up already? Looks like what you bragged about yesterday is starting to fall apart." He let the words hang there, an obvious taunt. Seems someone's going to quit halfway like last time. Well, never mind. It's not like we can't afford to put up with him. He pictured the future, Venusaur and the others growing into powerful Pokémon, while he would be left behind, always the little brother, always trailing after them. For a moment, the round land shark actually indulged the thought of being coddled and protected by big brothers. Ridiculous. He was the bully. He couldn't accept being weak. A snarl escaped him. His fighting spirit flared up again. Daguyu let out a quiet breath of relief. Appealing to the shark's pride had worked exactly as he'd hoped. That afternoon, Sheena came by Daguyu's farm again to buy some energy cubes. Daguyu handed them over and grinned. Thanks so much, Hina. If you hadn't beaten that round land shark yesterday, I wouldn't have known what to do. Huh? Sheena blinked, a little confused. Daguyu explained what had happened, and she covered her mouth to hide a giggle. So even Mr. Otani has trouble like that, she teased. Daguyu laughed. I'm not a particularly great trainer, so of course I do, but it's fine now. Sharknado's been training hard to get his pride back. I'm glad I could help, Sheena said, smiling. By the way, Mr. Otani... Otani, actually, I have a small request this time. Hina's cheeks flushed as she spoke. Oh, what is it? Otani smiled, curious. Hina took a breath. Could you teach me how to make snacks? That's hardly a big request, Otani replied, still smiling. Of course I can. Really? Thank you, Mr. Otani. Hina beamed. That afternoon, Otani and his sister Ai Guanxi set to work teaching Hina in the kitchen. Otani walked her through each step patiently, showing her how to measure, mix, and fold. Everything seemed simple enough, until the baking tray came out of the oven. Otani stared at the pan in disbelief. Where the cake should have been light and fragrant, there was only a plate of blackened mess. He had shown her the process step by step. This result made no sense. Try again, he said, unconvinced. Hina went through the motions nervously. She followed every instruction exactly, but when she opened the oven the second time, the same thing stared back at her, a pitch-black slab in the tray. Otani decided to test it himself. He used the same ingredients, the same temperature and timing, and his cake came out perfectly golden and smelling delicious. The housekeeper tried next and also produced a fragrant, properly baked cake. Then Hina tried once more, and once more a blackened cake. Otani rubbed his temples, baffled. He could accept a lack of talent, but not an outcome that seemed to defy every variable he could think of. How could the same recipe, the same oven, produce a perfect cake for everyone else, and only burnt results for Hina? They told Hina to calm down and take it slow. She closed her eyes, took a few steadying breaths, and started concentrating on each step. Working deliberately, she did everything more carefully. She slid the tray into the oven, waited patiently, and when she finally pulled the pan out, she found a slightly misshapen cake inside. Dagayu picked up a slice and tasted it. It wasn't perfect, a bit overdone around the edges, and not especially flavorful, but compared with the previous blackened disasters, it was a huge improvement. Watching her, Dagayu realized that Hina had always been impatient in the kitchen. She knew the steps, but kept misjudging the heat. Once she slowed down, even though her timing still needed work, she could at least produce an ordinary, edible cake. Thank you, Mr. Otani. Thank you, butler, Hina said, then threw her arms around the butler and began to cry. The housekeeper gently soothed her while Hina, shaken, explained to Dagayu why she'd been so nervous. She'd been hopeless at cooking since she was a child. Everything she made would burn black. Once her father had dared to taste one of her attempts and ended up in the hospital. The memory had left a deep mark on her, which is why even a small success now meant so much. Yesterday, Hina had enjoyed some delicious snacks at Daguyu's place and wanted to learn how he made them, but she still couldn't reproduce the results. Fortunately, Daguyu patiently corrected her mistakes, and she finally shook off that shadow of doubt. If you're free later, come practice at my place, he told her. Then when you get back from your trip, you can cook for your father. Hina nodded, sniffling a little, and awkwardly let go of her attendant's hand. The attendant didn't mind. She immediately started practicing with Hina. Seeing the two of them getting along so well, Daguyu didn't want to interrupt. He slipped out of the kitchen and headed for the training ground. Yuan Lucia had been training there since lunchtime. Over time, Daguyu had upgraded the facility, adding more equipment and even a dodgeball simulation room he designed himself. After the improvements, the place was thoroughly outfitted. Difficulty can be cranked up to level 100, and the simulator limits you to a single action per round, either attack or dodge. The only rule is simple: don't get hit by the red ball. So far, only Bulbasaur had cleared the level. Raiden was close, just a hair away from finishing level 100. Bulbasaur still relied on his whip to get through. It was so strong that water slid right off it, and any red training ball that came within reach was sent flying without mercy. The other Pokémon, including Kentaro and Gyarados, hadn't found a reliable method yet, but they were exploring and experimenting to discover what would work best for them. That afternoon, Roundland Shark spent hours in the dodgeball training room practicing the Dragon Claw technique. He came away bruised and sore from the constant hits of the training balls, but he refused to give up. Seeing his determination, Daguyu felt a rush of relief and pride, like an old father. After dinner, Yuan Lucia dozed off while sitting. Daguyu carefully applied ointment and massaged him, his heart aching a little, then carried him upstairs to bed and covered him with his own quilt. He went back downstairs to help the others with their training problems, collecting their questions and mentally planning solutions. Time slipped by as he organized their needs and worked out strategies. Before he knew it, it was late into the night. Daguyu put his notes away, deciding to sort through them one by one in the morning. In the room, Yuan Lucia was tossing and turning, having kicked off the quilt. Daguyu gently tugged the blanket back up, switched off the light, and went to sleep. Chapter 39. Training and Fighting. Yesterday, Daguyu helped the Pokémon put together a detailed training plan to match their growing strength. The first on the list was Bulbasaur. Although it had already tapped into natural energy, it still relied almost entirely on Vine Whip. When Daguyu asked why, Bulbasaur admitted it couldn't control the intensity of that energy very well. Daguyu frowned. That belief was a misconception. If a move can't be controlled now, the answer isn't to avoid using it. It's to practice until you can. Once he said that, Bulbasaur's face brightened. It realized it had been limiting itself. Daguyu drew up a follow-up program focused on energy control. The main venue would be the skill training range, a firing line with fixed and moving targets at different difficulty levels, like an evasion course but for precision and power. Bulbasaur would have to use a variety of moves to clear each stage until it could dial each one up or down at will. At the shooting range, Daguyu gave the first command. Bulbasaur stepped forward cautiously, gathered sunlight into its core, and unleashed a solar beam at a fixed dummy target. Boom! A blinding beam of light struck the training dummy, followed by a thunderous explosion. The shockwave almost knocked Daguyu off his feet. Stunned, he stared as the target was reduced to a pile of ash. When he looked back at his Venusaur, relief spread over his face as if someone had finally relieved a long-standing pressure. He shook himself and gave the order. Venusaur, keep firing your moves until you're exhausted. After that, we'll switch to solar beam training for today. For a while, the farm was alive with repeated blasts. Next up was Raidenmon. It was the textbook example of a glass cannon. Enormous offensive power paired with very low durability. Even after being strengthened by the cube and gaining a sturdier body than a normal Raidenmon, it could only just cling to life. That made its development straightforward. Maximize its speed so it moved fast enough to avoid being hit in the first place. As the old saying goes, there's no invincible fighting style, except perhaps speed. Daguyu started by putting a limiter on Raidenmon and sending him into the evasion chamber, beginning at the lowest setting and slowly ramping the difficulty as Raidenmon adapted. He asked his brother, Guanxi, to stay and monitor the sessions. If Raidenmon showed signs of strain, they would stop and let him recover. Next up was Kentaro. If Raidenmon was a high-speed special attacker, Kentaro was a high-speed physical striker, less nimble, but with raw linear acceleration. Daguyu decided to focus Kentaro's training on defensive counterattacks. To sharpen his instincts, Kentaro would practice with his eyes closed, so he learned to rely on timing and feel rather than sight. Since Raidenmon was already using the evasion room, Daguyu had Butterfree simulate attacks by flinging pebbles instead of delivering real strikes, then gradually increase the intensity so Kentaro could adapt safely. After that came plans for Gyarados, Snorlax, Sharknado, and Ogre. The next few days were a blur of high-intensity training. Daguyu boosted each Pokemon's nutrition and gave them nightly massages to help them recover. He was grateful for the help of the Guanxi siblings. Without them, keeping up with the schedule would have worn him out. A steady stream of trainers who had passed by stopped to watch, and Daguyu greeted each of them warmly. But as the exhibition progressed, everyone found their expectations overturned. How could Venusaur keep using powerful moves without ever seeming tired? Raiden moved so fast it was almost invisible. Kentaro could land precise blows even with his eyes covered. That Snorlax was enormous. Gyarados' muscles were ridiculously huge for a non-bodybuilding Pokémon. At first, the rotund shark looked the most ordinary, until it suddenly hoisted a boulder dozens of times its own weight and began doing strength training. At that point, every trainer went silent. A few of them were impressed they couldn't wait to test their own teams and challenged Dagayu on the spot. Dagayu accepted. He sent out Raiden first, and the battle was over in an instant. Raiden's speed was so extreme, the opposing trainer couldn't react. Next up was Kentaro, another brief fight. The opponent tried to sneak in an attack from behind, but Kentaro simply kicked him away and finished it. The remaining challengers fared no better. One after another, they were dispatched quickly and decisively. The watching trainers, who had come with curiosity, left with respect, their admiration for Dagayu and his team plain to see. One of the other trainers asked if he could join Daguyu's sessions. Dagayu politely refused at first, then told him that once he'd finished his own training, he planned to open the grounds to anyone who needed them. For the next stretch of time, Dagayu and his companions devoted themselves to training. They traded techniques and experiences with the other trainers who came by, learning from one another. Before long, word spread through the nearby towns. Close to the battle frontier, there lived a gentle farmer called Otani, generous and surprisingly skilled as a trainer. Every day, an endless stream of challengers arrived to test themselves. Dagayu quickly put a limit on it. He would accept only 3 challengers a day. The rest weren't put off. After getting his permission, they camped near the farm and made use of his training grounds. With so many people around during daylight hours, the farm chores had to be pushed into the night, and Daguyu's Butterfree was kept busy patrolling the fields to keep the peace. After a few days, the flow of visitors to Dagayu Farm tapered off, though 3 high-level trainers still came by every day to issue challenges. Dagayu spent his time helping the Pokémon review their training and battles. Each one had shown clear improvement. All that remained was to keep up the work. When he finished for the day and returned to the house, he realized Dew hadn't been around for a while. He wondered what had happened with the poaching group, but didn't want to bother Dew without cause. Maybe Dew was on an important mission, and it would be bad if he were injured. Eventually, Dagayu picked up his phone and opened the group chat. The others were sharing pictures and joking. The thread was full of emojis, which he quietly scrolled through. In a day or two, Bulbasaur and the others should be able to finish this phase of training and take a break. Dagayu sat at his desk and began, in silence, to record the day's training notes and battle summaries. Round Landshark wormed into Daguyu's arms and watched him sketch in his notebook. After a few minutes, it lost interest, wriggled free, and scampered downstairs to catch the Digimon cartoon on TV. The show's release was a hit. It won praise not just from children, but from adults, and even Pokémon fans, and brought Dagayu a substantial payday. Dagayu told him plainly, if he produced anything new, Dew and Company should be the first call. Dagayu packed up his things, switched off the lights, and went to sleep. Kanto, deep in the forest, Dew rode a fossil pterosaur through the treetops, directing a Charizard and a Dragonite as they fought fiercely below. From somewhere in the distance, a voice called out, "Boss, it's done. Let's fall back." "Ha, Mr. Dew, see you next time," Jay said with an arrogant smile, then turned and shot toward the waiting ship. "Trying to run? No way." Dew's voice cut through the air, but the poaching team had already begun to withdraw in an orderly fashion. Rear guards released a thick, black fog that rolled through the trees and quickly blinded the Alliance forces. A few trainers reacted quickly and used their skills to blow the black fog away, but it was already too late. Jay intercepted Dew at the ship's boarding ramp, keeping him from sabotaging the spacecraft. Dew couldn't break off the fight with her. He could only watch as the ship lifted, slipped into invisibility, and vanished. Jay managed to leap aboard in the last instant of takeoff. Damn it, Miss Juncha hissed through clenched teeth. "Clean up the scene," Dew said calmly. "I need to report this to the Alliance." Jay wasn't as strong as Du, but she was a king-level trainer and far from someone to be taken lightly. Worse, she had two brothers, Alidos and Dragonite, who were both nearly as powerful as she was. Du had been forced to control 3 Pokémon almost single-handedly while constantly supporting the people on the ground. He felt tied down the whole time. Arena battles and field engagements were completely different animals, far more chaotic, no rules to protect you, and plenty of unexpected complications. After all the preparation they'd done, the poaching crew had still managed to get away. Du felt the fatigue settle in and a deeper frustration at how close they had come and how quickly it had slipped through their fingers. Above all, it was the spaceship, invisible, completely silent in flight, and able to take off and land on a whim, that had allowed Jay to get away. I pushed the thought aside and set to work on the summary report. There was still a lot to do. When I was finished, I would go straight to Otani's farm and get some real rest. No one was going to stop me, I told myself. Chapter 40, One After Another. Morning found Dagyu in the fields, busy with farm work. The special training had finally finished, and he finally had stretches of free time. He planted seeds, molded bricks for the new shed, and fit in a few practice battles. It was a comfortable life. The Pokémon handled their own daily routines, and Dagyu rarely had to worry, except for the little troublemaker, the round land shark, who still insisted on being knocked around now and then. He was kneeling in the soil when 2 figures arrived from above. Du glided down on Charizard, landing with a swish of wings, and Daigo followed, stepping off Metagross. Both looked out of sorts, Daigo with a peculiar expression and Du with a sour face, which left Dagyu puzzled. "How come you two are together today?" he asked, offering them steaming cups of tea and a plate of snacks. Du took a slow sip while Daigo, awkward, accepted a cup and nibbled at the food in silence. Du finally spoke, glancing at Daigo. "Daigo told those guys where you live. You're going to be busy today." Daigo winced and scratched the back of his head, forcing a laugh. "Yeah, Sorona's been pestering me every day with questions. A few others have been bugging me too." I just blurted it out," Du admitted with an embarrassed shrug. Dagyu watched him for a moment, equal parts bemused and amused. "That's all right. We don't usually get many visitors at the farm. It's actually nice to have people around for a change." "What do you mean, no guests? Am I not a guest?" Du protested, unconvinced. Dagyu rolled his eyes. "You're a terrible guest, eating and drinking for free every day. I'm just lucky I haven't kicked you out." Du gave an awkward little cough. Dagyu asked how many people were coming. Dawu hesitated, then muttered, "About 7 or 8. Dagyu didn't think it was a problem. If anything, the number excited him. "All right, let's make it a proper feast." He decided to throw together a full banquet to celebrate the surprise visit. He called to Lai Du and Daigo to help drag tables and chairs out into the yard. Then he sent 2 idle workers into town to buy supplies, handing them an enormous menu that trailed along the ground. Dagyu had rewritten the menu himself. Every dish was adapted to use ingredients from the Pokémon world. Who would have thought those two could get everything sorted with a single phone call each? Once they'd made the calls, they settled in the living room and drank tea as if nothing needed doing. They'd even phoned a few people to help Dagyu in the kitchen. Dagyu inwardly despised the rich young masters. Because they had money, they could make things happen with no fuss. With the extra help, his cooking sped up, and one by one more people drifted into the living room. Fortunately, when the house had been renovated, they'd left the living room deliberately large to accommodate Pokémon, so even with a crowd, it didn't feel cramped. Du, why didn't you tell us you had a friend this interesting?" Adek clapped Du on the shoulder, grinning. Du's face stayed gloomy. He looked borderline disgusted with Adek, but Adek didn't care. He sat down beside Du and started helping himself to the snacks. "This tastes just like my grandmother's. So good," Adek said through a few happy tears as he munched. Kona stared at him, speechless. "Stop eating so much. Aren't you afraid you'll choke?" he scolded. Then Kona shrugged Adek off and, ignoring him, began chatting cheerfully with Sirona and Kaluna. Guanxi and his sister kept everyone entertained in the living room while Dogyu came out of the kitchen to greet them. He apologized. There were too many dishes to prepare, so dinner would be late. They'd have to make do with some snacks at noon. Then he went straight back to the stove. Du, bored with waiting, grabbed his fishing gear and headed for the lake behind the house. Adek and Daigo trailed after him. Shortly after, 2 more people arrived at Daguyu's farm, Shiba and Aju. They stopped to say hello to Daguyu, chatted for a while with Shra, Irona and the others, and then joined the group at the lake to fish. Macaulay arrived much later in the evening, greeting everyone cheerfully before settling in the living room to wait for dinner. By then, the smell of cooking had already filled the house. For a moment it seemed like the people outside would have stormed in if Daguyu hadn't kept them at bay. After a day's hard work, Daguyu finally finished cooking all 6 dishes at 10:08 p.m. It wasn't a full Manchu Han banquet, of course, more of a pared-down everyman's version, but it had still taken the whole day, and Daguyu was exhausted. He personally led the serving, carrying the plates into the room. Du and the others were already seated, waiting obediently like children for a feast. The table groaned under every kind of dish: steamed lamb, steamed bear paw, steamed deer tail, roast duck, roast chicken, roast goose, braised salted duck, soy braised chicken, bacon, pine flour sausage, tripe, dried meat, sausages, assorted soup plates, smoked chicken, white tripe, fried whitebait, stewed eel, steamed ham, cold dishes, hot dishes, snacks, everything you could want. Daguyu took his time, happily reading off each dish as though announcing treasures. Du looked at him with mock resentment. "Why have you never cooked like this for me before?" he asked. Daguyu pretended not to notice, straightened his clothes, and stood to raise his glass. "It's rare my farm has so many guests," he said. "Tonight we must eat and drink well." Glasses were raised. Just as Adek reached for his chopsticks, Kona jabbed out and stopped him. "Hey, asshole, we haven't taken the picture yet." What followed was an assault of camera phones. Sharona, Karuno, and the rest started snapping away non-stop, then promptly uploaded a flood of food photos to the group chat. After they finished taking photos, no one could wait any longer to dig in. Adek picked up a piece with his chopsticks and popped it into his mouth. Almost instantly, he felt like he was floating, a warm, soothing rush that spread through him and knit up many of the old, hidden injuries he'd been carrying. He blinked and stared at the dishes in front of him in stunned disbelief. Others picked up on his reaction, and without anyone saying a word, a silent battle erupted. Daguyu took a bite himself and glanced at his skill panel out of reflex. His cooking skill had jumped to superb. A few of the quiet trainers and breeders were still only at advanced, so how had the cooking skill already reached superb? That discovery dissolved whatever restraint anyone had left. Plates were attacked with abandon. The better-mannered guests found themselves at a serious disadvantage. Manners didn't help when the food tasted like this, and if you were slow, Adek would swallow it all. Shiba proved to be the only one who could keep pace with him. Their eating speeds were almost identical. The dishes on the table vanished with terrifying speed. Everyone, humans and Pokémon alike, got their share of the feast and ate with obvious delight. The chubby, land-dwelling shark Pokémon slyly clambered up onto Daguyu's legs and begged for more. Daguyu couldn't refuse. He scooped up a plate and set it in the little fellow's lap. The Pokémon beamed and dug in happily. Kona was the first to give up, clutching her distended stomach. "Ah, my stomach! I can't eat another bite," she moaned. Sharona and Karuna followed soon after, equally defeated. The meal had been delicious, but they were completely full. There were 108 dishes laid out, enough that even sampling a bit of each would fill a person. Watari, Daigo, Adek, Silva, Akane, and Macaulay kept going the longest, but one by one they too finally surrendered. With the plates cleared away, Daguyu shared the remaining food among the Pokémon who weren't quite satisfied yet. They gratefully finished the last scraps. After the table was cleared, hot tea and digestion tablets were brought out. The group settled in the courtyard to chat and relax, unaware that elsewhere a commotion had already broken out. Voices could be heard in the distance, someone shouting, "I don't want to work overtime." "Sharona, why did you go into the city and leave me here working overtime? You're the champion and I'm the champion. The food looked amazing and you didn't even take me." "I quit. I love Yaya the most." "Master, you left me here alone and went to eat without me." At Old Cadger enjoying retirement. Old Cadger enjoying retirement. "Alice, you silly child, Your master is on a business trip. I love Yaya the most. I saw all the photos. You were the happiest person there. Old cadre enjoying retirement. Ha ha ha, really? It was delicious? Karuna, Sirona, you don't love me anymore. You actually went to eat without me behind my back. Next time for sure, Xiao Yaya. Tiramisu definitely next time, Xiao Yaya. The coolest evil Pokémon, Kona. The group chat was coming apart at the seams, too. I'm breaking up with you. I am pure and innocent. I'll bring some delicious snacks. Oh, the most handsome evil Pokémon. Okay. I love you the most. I want one too. I want one too. Favorite Yaya. I want one too. I want one too. Don't want to work overtime. I want one too. I want one too. And then the chat flooded with a chorus of me too. At first it had only been a couple of people, but once everyone started clamoring in, the ones who tried to push to the front ended up getting left empty-handed. All eyes and messages turned to Daguyu. Daguyu sent back nothing but a string of shrugs. There was nothing for it. I went to the kitchen and stayed late, making a huge pile of snacks. As people were drifting out, I handed them packages to take home. When I finished, I posted a photo in the group. The snacks were ready. Thank you, good people. May you have a peaceful life, I typed. The reactions came at once. Emojis, thumbs ups, more thank yous. As the night deepened, one by one they left, each walking out the door with armfuls of snacks. Daguyu saw each of them to the door, telling them they were welcome to come back any time. When he returned to the living room, only Watari, Daigo, and Adek were still sitting there, motionless. The expressions on their faces made it clear they weren't planning to leave that night, so Daguyu and Guanxi went upstairs and made up the 2 guest rooms for Watari and Adek. When they came back down, the 4 of them settled in and talked for a while. The conversation turned to the recent poaching ring. Daigo was burning with anger as he spoke. However tightly they had closed the net around the gang, they had somehow slipped through. Is there an insider? Daguyu asked after a moment of thought. Silence fell. Daigo rubbed his chin. I suspected that, he admitted, but there's no hard evidence right now. If we launch a wide-ranging investigation without proof, we'll tip them off, and we'll make everyone below us panic. Adek shrugged. He had been a champion and had seen similar situations before. Then don't go charging in, he said calmly. Keep watch on movements down there. When you find real evidence, take the person down. Daguyu didn't look convinced. No, he said slowly. You're underestimating how tangled things are in Johto and Kanto. This isn't just a local band of poachers. There are too many players and too many interests. If there really is a mole, or if this ties into something bigger, waiting could be dangerous. They all fell quiet again, the weight of what Daguyu had said settling over them. Outside, the night was still, but inside the house, the problem they faced felt far from settled. It's not just a matter of internal collaborators, Du said, his voice heavy with concern. Kanto and Johto are the Alliance's headquarters and the birthplace of the whole movement. They hold an unshakable position in the Pokémon world. If things break down there, it affects everything. He went on. Factional infighting among the Alliance's top leadership had been growing worse, and President Damalanji had remained silent. Du wasn't a politician. He felt helpless. A new faction led by Sakaki was gathering strength, and Du admitted he distrusted Sakaki's motives. He'd been careful around him, but these suspicions weren't something he wanted to air to outsiders. Daigo and Adek exchanged a look, thought for a moment, and said nothing. Daguyu watched them, puzzled, then wisely let the subject drop. He shifted the conversation to something lighter, and the tension in the room gradually eased. After a while, they washed up and went to bed. Lying on his mattress, Daguyu kept turning Du's words over in his mind. He had to admit he had no knack for politics. He was a complete layman. In the end, he decided not to dwell on it and let sleep take him. Besides, Du would catch the sky if it ever fell. It would never be his turn. So pull the blanket over your head and go to sleep.